Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron and special guest, Jay Christian. What's up, guys?
What up? What up?
What's up, boys? Always a pleasure to have Jay on. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of laughs on this pod as we make fun of some of these crappier teams at the end of the division.
And like Kory mentioned, we're going to talk division today. It's going to be the Southwest Division off-season preview. Before we get started, just a reminder, you can check out all of our off-season content at OTGBasketball.com and all of our pods on Blog Talk Radio and iTunes. But let's get started with the Houston Rockets. Honestly, an amazing season, 65-17. James Harden won MVP, went 7 games with the KD Warriors, probably the hardest test they've had yet. What were your thoughts on the season the Rockets had?
Yeah, I think that was sort of the best case scenario. I think that's what the Warriors, that's what the Rockets sort of envisioned when Chris Paul joined this team, right? Was, can we get the Golden State Warriors to a Game 7 in the Western Conference Finals in our building? That was the goal from training camp. And that actually came to fruition. To actually see that plan happen to where how they envisioned it, how their Warrior team envisioned it to happen that way was pretty remarkable. What they did not envision, obviously, was Chris Paul having the hamstring injury at the end of Game 5. But it is actually pretty neat when you look back and think about what the goals were for this team, for them to actually land on in the position right where they wanted to be, which is a Game 7 against the Golden State Warriors with the right to the NBA Finals.
This year for the Rockets, they had a franchise record, I believe, in wins on the season. We saw one of the best offenses. We saw James Harden, Chris Paul put to bed all of those, can they coexist when there's only one basketball? What seems to be the trend whenever there's a super team made, everyone has to go, well, there's only one basketball. How can these guys coexist? And again, I think Chris Paul was really good at taking a back seat, letting James Harden still be the man. We saw what they can be at their absolute best when the offense is clicking. And then, for example, in the Western Conference Finals, in that Game 7, we saw what can happen when you rely on the three ball. They missed 27 straight threes or whatever it was against the Warriors. But for the Rockets overall, I think if you're a Rockets fan or even, Daryl Morey, you're looking at this, you're saying this season by the numbers, by the stats, was completely a success. We were right there. We were where we wanted to be. We competed with the Warriors. And if an injury doesn't happen, maybe, or if we add one or two smaller pieces, this team can win a title.
Exactly. Like you said, Chris Paul fit in great. And then all the other new pieces, PJ Tucker, Bob Moute, bringing all those guys in one season to click like this and win 65 games. Honestly, you could argue they're one hamstring away from winning an NBA championship.
Yeah.
So it's not out of the realm of possibility. And like you mentioned, Kory, the bad luck with 27 straight missed threes, it's just tough. But they're in great position. If they bring it back next year, there's a good chance they could do the same thing, but a lot of things have to go right. Looking at their cap situation, it's not amazing because they have to re-sign Chris Paul and Clint Capela and Trevor Ariza, and they're hoping to maybe move Ryan Anderson or something. So with the cap holds, they don't really have any cap space. What are your thoughts on the cap situation?
If they could somehow move Ryan Anderson, this team would be ecstatic. That contract of him next year making $20 million per year is just brutal because that's a guy who, honestly, against the Warriors in particular, he couldn't even be out there. I think he had some, 5 to 8 minute stints, and they were really bad, 5 to 8 minute stints. If you could get lucky and move a guy like that, it opens up the possibility of them going after, like a Paul George possibly. But, they really need, I think, to try and get rid of that Ryan Anderson contract. But the issue is, who really wants to take that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ryan Anderson is this albatross around their neck, right? It was this great sort of, poison pill signing that Morey had a few years ago. Stretch forward to support Dwight Howard, complement his skill set, kind of bringing that Orlando magic, no pun intended, to the Rockets when he first signed Ryan Anderson. But, yeah, you can't – you'd have to I can't even imagine a scenario where someone would take that contract if you're trying to wheel and deal with the Rockets. And any trade partner, I think, can hold the Rockets' feet to the fire because they know the Rockets need to move that Ryan Anderson contract to have any hope of having some cap flexibility to, go back and compete with the Warriors next season. So it's I think that would be Morey's sort of biggest cap challenge that we've seen him enroll as GM is how he moves that money for Ryan Anderson.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you could probably argue that they might have to take on 2 first-round picks to move 2 first-round picks to move Ryan Anderson because they won't have any leverage in the situation. They don't have any young pieces to kind of tag along either. But
yeah, that's right. Oh, go ahead.
Go.
I was just going to say that with Morey, too, and he's also that guy. He is, process Jedi master as well, right? So he's been on record, numerous times as saying, you want picks, you want assets. So I was just going to say he's not one that's prone to give up that sort of ransom, right? He's the one trying to leverage those kind of deals. He's usually on the other end of those types of negotiations, and he's not. It's just not in his DNA from what we've seen him enroll as someone who says, all right, first-round picks, we'll give those up. He knows how golden they are. I mean, he's from, the Sam Hinkie school, or Sam Hinkie's from his school, rather, on how you develop teams and build teams and asset accumulation. So he's not one to give up those picks, but he's going to probably have to make that decision if he wants to move Ryan Anderson.
Yeah, I think it'll come down about who they're getting if they move Ryan Anderson. I don't think they'll move him unless they have something in mind. And like you said, Morey's one of the best in the business. And when it comes to the numbers, and if someone can get it done, he'll be able to get it done. But looking at the Rockets, what team needs going to next season? Where can they add to this team?
The team needs is honestly, and it's sad that this is how the NBA is. They need another star. They need that Ryan Anderson money to be a third star, whoever that is.
If they could turn it into a person, that would be great.
If you erase Ryan Anderson's name and you put Paul George or somebody else in there, then completely different. They need for me, I think they need a wing. I think Trevor Ariza is the ideal format of a player, a guy who can hit threes, a guy who can play defense. But you need Trevor Ariza when he, was playing for the Lakers. You need a younger guy. You need a guy who, is just a little bit quicker, who can put in a little bit more offensive impact. I think I've harped on this before. He went 0 for 10 or whatever from 3 in that game 7. If you have anybody, who just hits 2 of those, or if Ariza hits 2 of those or 3 of those, we're talking about a different complexion of that game possibly. And obviously the miss 27 also just plays a huge role. But I think they need a wing. I think they need a younger wing, somebody who can go out there and play solid defense and just be, a second or third option. I think ideally, at least for Chris Paul would love to be a third offensive option and kind of just, play off of his James Harden and another guy.
Not only the other star, Kory, I think, you're right. The 3-and-D guy, possibly adding a Paul George. I think they could possibly get away, though, adding just some talent. It didn't necessarily have to be a star if they add some other good pieces, but with a cap situation, it's going to be very difficult. I would probably argue they could use a veteran backup point guard. Not somebody who needs to play a lot, but just somebody to have in case Chris Paul goes down. Because if they just had somebody to give James Harden a little bit of a rest in that Western Conference Finals, it would have made a big difference. So some just playmaking added to the roster.
Kory, I couldn't agree more. I think a younger, more versatile Trevor Ariza is exactly what they need, and I think that is in the form of Paul George, quite frankly. And again, Daryl Morey, just knowing his DNA, his MO, you need stars. He says you need stars. I mean, he's on the sort of the cutting edge of one of these first GMs to say, look, stars is what. It doesn't matter what stars you have. This idea of can they play together, or can all these small forwards be on the same team, which we'll talk about a little bit later with other teams and other prospects we've heard so far. This idea of like you just get players and figure it out. It's like, no, you just need stars. In this league of stars, you need stars. And the Rockets are missing a third star. And I think Paul George is a perfect fit. He is one of the premier 3-and-D guys, probably no worse than the third 3-and-D guy in the NBA, arguably, probably the second, depending on how you look at it. But that's what they need, and I think that allows Trevor Ariza to slide back into a sort of Andre Iguodala role, where he's a sixth man, getting significant minutes, sort of driving the second unit, but also can come in and contribute and play great defense and be offensive support for the Rockets next season.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an ideal situation if they're able to add a star and keep Ariza, which will probably be tough. But talking about that, looking at team free agents, we got Chris Paul, Trevor Ariza, Luaba Mute, Gerald Green, Tariq Black, Joe Johnson, then Clint Capela, restricted free agent. What are your thoughts going through each one and the chances these players resign?
I think Chris Paul is just about a lock to come back. I think something ridiculous would have to happen for him not to return. Something like, obviously LeBron going to him and pretty much saying, if you and I play with whoever, we can win a title. Maybe Chris Paul would leave. But I think Chris Paul truly enjoys being in Houston. I actually just watched that 3-part series ESPN did on Chris Paul when he was last offseason, he was first traded and his transition to the Rockets. And he really seemed to like it there. Him and James Harden have a really good relationship. So I think Chris Paul is, probably the easy guy to see back next year. Trevor Ariza, unless he comes back for cheap, I think he may be gone. But again, Ariza was a big reason Chris Paul also came or wanted to come because they have a good relationship. Tariq Black, who cares? I think Clint Capela, they're going to obviously match anything he gets. I don't think they're going to let him go unless, Chris Paul says, I want DeAndre over Clint Capela, but I just don't see why he would want that. Abalamute, if he wants to come back for cheap, I'd give him a chance. Obviously, injuries plagued his season, and I know, Nick, you were really hoping that he was going to turn it on in the Western Conference Finals. He just couldn't get a rhythm. Gerald Green, he was really solid for them when they signed him off that, first a 10-day contract when James Harden was down. So if he wanted to come back for cheap, I bring him back. But Joe Johnson, Aaron Jackson, Markel Brown, those guys can all go.
Yeah, I think that's about right. I'm just picturing Nick was, caping hard for Bob Moute to come in and really shine and show you guys what was up, what he could do, his potential. But unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. I think that the biggest signing, or the two biggest ones, Kory, you hit on, one is Chris Paul. I think the question you turn around and say, Rockets, do you sign him for what he's going to command, which is the supermax? And after we just had this whole pontification about signing stars, I think you have to, right? But then again, Chris Paul kind of gave you Exhibit A in Game 5. Unfortunately, kind of broke down at a very inopportune time. So that should be interesting how that plays out. I agree, though, he'll probably re-sign unless he and LeBron are on a secret group chat right now as we speak. Capela, I agree, same thing as, star in the waiting. I think he had a breakout season. Teams will come at him, and the Rockets, have to match. And then Ariza, yeah, I'm not a favor of any kind of hometown discount. So if he can get more on the open market, I could see that happening. I could see, I don't know if we maybe talk about this, depending on what happens out in Los Angeles, if he doesn't go back to LA with a potential super team that could be forming out in La La Land. So that could be interesting to watch as well. But I think those are the big dominoes to fall. Everyone else, like you say, Kory, it's sort of on the margins. I would sign Gerald Green back, just, depending on the price, just because hometown favorite. And I'd love, and he played with no fear in that Warriors series as well, for better or worse at times. But yeah, I think it comes down to Paul, Capela, and what they want to do with Ariza going forward.
And the Paul situation is really interesting. Like you mentioned, Jay, if he signs that max, you're looking at farther down the line in that fourth and fifth year of that deal where you're paying him close to 40 or over $40 million. And obviously he's not going to be able to hold up, especially with all the injuries he's had. So it's definitely somewhat of a risk for the Rockets, but it's almost like their hands are tied and they have to, kind of pay him. Looking at Capela, what do you think the numbers are going to be for him? Do you think someone's going to offer him a max deal in restricted free agency and kind of make the Rockets make a hard decision?
Oh, I would do that. I would do that in a heartbeat. I would, because that's what Daryl Morey would do. I think there was, and I keep harping on this, but I think it's really important. I think that there was a school, the sort of Sloan school, graduates that came out in the NBA with Morey and this other sort of group. They were ahead of these other GMs, sort of went Moneyball essentially for the NBA a few years ago. And I think rosters and front offices are starting to catch up. And so a total Morey play would be to offer this super contract to a conference or division rival and force them to match that for a restricted free agent. And Capela is also someone too. If you're the other team offering the money, it's like you really could use him. You don't want to. It won't just backfire on you, right? So if the other team says, "Okay, we won't match," then you're stuck with this guy that you don't want. Capela is an asset to have. So if you offer him money and force the Rockets' hands, I would do that in a heartbeat for sure.
Yeah, and one thing you like about Capela, not only is he a solid rim protector and rim runner, he does have some nice versatility where we saw him kind of get on the perimeter and defend wings a little bit in point guard. So it's not like it's something you can do every game and every minute, but he can do it once in a while. So definitely Capela has some nice potential moving forward. Trade-wise, what are we thinking for the Rockets?
Trade-wise, obviously the only trade I really see is something that involves a Ryan Anderson. But the shitty thing is, there's not a lot of young talent on this roster for, the Rockets to really pair. Do you want do you want to pair one of your future picks with a Ryan Anderson? You're probably going to have to. But again, I think it really depends on who wants to take on the salary dump over Ryan Anderson. There's a few teams out there. I know Nick will be like, well, the Pacers have cap space. Nick, we do not want Ryan Anderson on this team.
Atlanta maybe or Sacramento would be teams. I don't think the Pacers would be interested unless you want that, Kory. That's all you.
I think actually I like Atlanta. Atlanta possibly. He could be solid out there. He'll get playing time. But I think that's the only.
One late first-round draft pick is going to move the needle on taking $20 million for this upcoming season and $20 million the next season, because most likely we're looking at the Rockets being a bottom 5 pick in the draft for the next few seasons anyway. So I don't know.
Damn, is it 2 more years for Ryan Anderson?
Yeah, 2 more years, 20 next year and then 21.
Jesus, yeah. So the trade conversation starts. It's like Kory's saying. It's ironic because it's what do they trade? Well, you got to trade Ryan Anderson. I don't care how you do it. Like you send him, you I don't know what you trade him piece like a stake in the Astros and Ryan Anderson. Whatever you can do to move that contract off your books. But like you said, Nick, no one's going to do that. It's not Ryan Anderson full stop. It's Ryan Anderson and dot. So that's really what the question becomes. But the cupboard's sort of bare. You got vets. I mean, I guess a few expirings that you could sort of look at maybe, but like when we went down the roster, most of those guys are free agents or team options or player options. So it's not an asset. It's like you're trying to sell kryptonite. You're just like, here, take this. It's like no one wants that. You know what I mean? So, God, man, I didn't know it was $40 million. That makes it worse. Yeah, Ryan Anderson is a Rocket for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, that sucks. I can't see it. Which is also why I'm not a GM. But holy cow, if he's not a Rocket the next 2 years, Morey deserves exec of the year for that move alone. So.
And not to mention, if they wanted to pair him with a Gordon or a Tucker, which probably wouldn't like to move because they need those players, it would boost up the numbers so high that a team doesn't want to take on that much cap space unless they're like, it's just a no situation doesn't really make sense because I don't think a lot of teams believe Ryan Anderson can help them win.
No, he couldn't even get on the floor. That's the thing, right? It wasn't even an audition in the playoffs, right? He didn't even play himself into any money or anything. It was like, when can we use him? I mean, the model in the NBA's, like most leagues, is a copycat league, and you're seeing a blueprint of what certain teams have had success with against the Golden State Warriors, anyone who considers themselves contenders, that's what they're going after, right? And if Ryan Anderson can't get on the floor against those guys, then what value is he to me, right? If I'm a GM or a team trying to build and take my shot, if I'm Minnesota or if I'm, I don't know, Denver or Portland, what can Ryan Anderson do for me if I'm trying to take my shot at Golden State? Nothing. He proved quite apparently in very limited minutes that he is, albatross on the court. So,
yeah, that might be just one they have to stick with unless they're willing to really, throw away some picks to move him. But talking team free agency, the way they could make it work, they could still have the mid-level exception. They would probably end up going high in the tax because they'd have to match Capela and then obviously re-sign Chris Paul. But what are some free agent targets you think they could go after that maybe would help this team?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as we mentioned, I think Paul George is the big fish. They've already mentioned they are going to aggressively pursue Paul George. Obviously, retaining Chris Paul. I think Clint Capela you got to bring back. And then, other than that, I'm looking at guys like maybe Tyreke Evans. I know they had interest in Tyreke Evans at the trade deadline, but nothing could come to tuition. Maybe you go after a Wayne Ellington, somebody who can add more three-point pop. A guy like Seth Curry would interest me, Marco Bellinelli. Again, the Rockets have shown that they want to chuck up, 45 to 53s a game, so you just got to surround them with a bunch of shooters. So I think for me, it's just guys like that. Maybe even a Jeff Green if you wanted to kind of, I know Abalamute was the ideal, stretch four for them, but maybe you give Jeff Green a shot. But it's a lot of those guys who can kind of just come in and give you some buckets with Chris Paul or James Harden facilitating.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that's pretty much the list. I mean, I think anyone contending, I think the conversation starts in a lot of ways with LeBron James, of course, that caveat. I don't see that, and I really don't. The more I watch, I didn't really find that to be. I didn't find LeBron to be a fit for the Rockets, just because notwithstanding everything I just said 5 minutes ago, with stars and getting talent together. But I watched them play, and the Rockets have a style that works for them, and I think it got them 65 wins in the Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. But it was not, I don't think that's the way LeBron plays. I mean, like you said, Kory, like you talk about being shooters around the team or whatever, or around the perimeter. That's kind of what LeBron, sort of predicated on. So I don't think he is a viable option, in my opinion. I think Paul George is a better fit for that team. I think he fits a need, something that they were truly lacking in the playoffs, sort of 3-and-D guy who doesn't necessarily need the ball to create as much as maybe some others. But then I also like the idea of sort of bargain shopping and sort of, filling out the roster with Tariq Evans, with Jeff Green possibly, guys like that to sort of fill those roles. I mean, you got two dominant guards that can take care of the scoring load and the ball handling, and then you just get some other guys, again, that are big, strong guys that can defend on the wings and also knock down open shots. I think that's the blueprint for Houston.
Yeah, and just, not that Trevor Ariza is, a bad defender, because he's still a very good defender, but the defense for Paul George would be something they could really use. He was obviously, I think, top 5 in steals or top 3 in deflection. So, he was really active hands, and that would have been something they could have used. Obviously Kevin Durant's going to get his, but throwing PJ Tucker and then throwing a handsy Paul George, it could have just given them a lot more, just, because disrupting the Warriors' offense.
Well, not only that, defensively, offensively, he gives you another person that could score as well. When Chris Paul went down, it was just James Harden pretty much and some Eric Gordon, but you throw Paul George in there, that's somebody who can create as well. So I think that's obviously the dream, is to get LeBron or Paul George. Probably unlikely just because they'd have to move contracts and get really tricky. I wouldn't be surprised they went after, maybe another big off the bench, like somebody like a Trevor Booker or Nerlens Noel, someone you could have on the cheap. As well, I think, like, if they added, like I mentioned, I think a veteran point guard, not somebody who's going to play a lot, but just to have in case Chris Paul were to go down would help, or just another playmaker if that's a veteran. I think, if you're looking at even Dwayne Wade, if he wanted to sign like a cheap deal and just be there as a backup, obviously the relationship with Chris Paul, and I just think they need to add a little bit something in case Chris Paul does get hurt, which it seems like a likely thing. Just don't put too much pressure on James Harden and kind of wear him down, which we saw has been an issue for him in a lot of his career.
LeBron knew that the banana boat guys were washed, right, when they were on that banana boat, right? He knew, like here's the thing, like you just said that with Dwayne Wade, it made me think, like LeBron, and we'll talk about, I'm sure when we segue to the Spurs, we'll talk about the imaginations and the things they got going on, with breaking news and whatnot. But I bring that up because I think, if you believe the conspiracy theories that, LeBron and Kawhi Leonard are on a group text, behind the scenes, probably orchestrating things to Los Angeles. So we all know LeBron's very calculating, right? We all know. I just think it's funny, like how the banana boat crew, we heard about that circa, 2010, 11, whatever it was. They could have worked a way to get somewhere together if they wanted to. I feel like LeBron looked at Anthony and was like, nah, I'm good. D Wade, I mean, he literally left D Wade on a plane, like they were in Vegas, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to Cleveland, and Dwayne Wade was sitting right next to him. And then I think he still wants to play with Paul, but then Chris Paul went down. I mean, I think LeBron's a good dude and a good friend, but if he wanted the banana boat thing to happen, it would have happened. LeBron's also a basketball savant, and I think he looked at it and said, we can kick it on vacation, but I'm not sure if I want to play with you guys. I'm trying to chase a ghost, right? I don't have time.
At least not right now.
It's not right now. I don't have time for this bullshit. Maybe when we're getting ready to retire, we can do it all once in New York or something. But
hey.
I think it's interesting. I think that could have, if he wanted it to happen, I think that could have happened years ago. But,
as I've said on a previous podcast, Melo has not opted into that player option. I'm not sure what he's waiting for. He said he's going to take money. I'm just saying, I guarantee there has been some conversation between Paul, Melo, Wade, and LeBron, because I don't see why Melo wouldn't opt in yet unless he was looking at some kind of option out there. And obviously, I'm not saying that is going to happen. And also, I don't know if you guys saw, after the finals, LeBron, he still loves Dwayne Wade. I don't think he thinks Wade's washed, because he said Wade would have been crucial to us if we had him in the finals.
I think he's just being nice.
I do too.
Because if he really thought that, I don't think he would have allowed Dwayne Wade to get traded. It's not like they got a ton for him in anything, or it worked out in some crazy deal. And I think Wade just really didn't fit with that team. And there was rumors that came out that there was some locker room issues with Wade and the rest of the Cavaliers, with similar to what happened with the Bulls the previous year. But moving on from the Rockets, talking New Orleans Pelicans, 48 and 34. Honestly, a great season, especially considering Boogie Cousins went down. They swept the Trailblazers in round 1. Then they got beat by the Warriors in round 2. But overall, I think a successful season for the Pels, and AD looked like a top 5 player.
Yeah, he looked like a man-child. Jesus. They gave Portland that work. I was very shocked by that in the playoffs. That's probably the biggest shocker of me this postseason. Right up there with Utah, sort of taking out OKC, but it was actually a little more evenly matched than I first realized, probably. But the Pelicans, man, they got on a run, and it was kind of one of those runs. If they, if this were football and they were so hot, I think it's one of those things where they actually make it to like the Super Bowl or the championship game, because they were just hot after that Portland series. And I think actually waiting on the Warriors kind of quelled their momentum a little bit. I don't obviously think they would have defeated the Warriors necessarily with the team they had, but I mean, they were hot going into the next round, and it just kind of ran out of steam towards the end there.
Fantastic year. I mean, obviously we got to see for majority of the season the Anthony Davis and Marcus Cousins combination, fire and ice as they were called. And, to start off the year, they looked like those two guys were dominant, and the role players and their supporting cast just wasn't good enough. And then, DeMarcus Cousins gets hurt. Me and I'm sure a lot of other people read off this team and said, they're screwed now. They might not even make the playoffs because Cousins goes down. And then the team gets, better. It supercharged the team. Obviously, they traded for Miracek at the deadline, and he was fantastic as a stretch 4 for them. Anthony Davis, as we mentioned, top 3 MVP, top 3 defensive player of the year. Drew Holiday. Man, did he come alive in that series against Portland. I mean, he put the entire NBA world on notice that he's a lethal two-way guard who can do everything. So I think for the Pelicans, it was obviously a really good year. A fan base that hasn't, seen a ton of success from the Pelicans, and they got to the second round. And now you're just trying to get better.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Drew Holiday had an amazing first-round series in the postseason. He really put everybody on notice. I think going to next season, it's going to be kind of level of play up. Where do you guys think AD sits in terms of rankings of NBA players actively? Is he top 5, top 3? Where do you have him sitting?
I think so definitively ahead of AD. I always do that when I do the list. I'm like, okay, how many guys are like ahead of him? No more debate about it, or no debate about it, rather. I'd say LeBron. I would say KD. And for me, quite honestly, and not being a prisoner of the moment, but I think those are the 2 full stops. I think I pause after those 2. I mean, because anybody else, I think whoever you name is the 3rd best player, I can make an argument for AD, whether that's Kawhi or James Harden or Steph. I mean, maybe Steph's ahead of him, so probably no worse than 4th, I would say. But, man, he's up there. Who's the football coach to say, if he's not head of the class, it doesn't take long to call roll, right? I mean, he's, I'd say no worse than 4th on a bad day.
Yeah, I think he's top 5, no doubt. I think it's definitely LeBron first. I'm not a huge when I'm looking at Anthony Davis and Kevin Durant's game. Like for me, it's actually hard to say Kevin Durant is like surely better than Anthony Davis, because I feel like because they both have length, I look at them sort of similar. But I think Kevin Durant's still a second, and then I would put Anthony Davis 3rd. And Kawhi for me drops just because he hasn't played, and we don't. I mean, obviously we hope and expect him to come back to what he was, but you don't really know when a guy misses an entire year for an injury. But I think he's definitely top 5, and then where you want to put him between 5 and 3, you can definitely make a case.
Yeah. I like the way you kind of worded it, Jay. You could make the argument for 3 for any of those guys. So he's kind of up into that top 3, possibly depending on who you're asking, because you still have Steph there, Kawhi, and James Harden. But I think you easily could make the argument for AD as well because of his two-way ability. So moving forward, there's a chance he could even move a little bit higher just because he keeps getting better, and I don't think he's hitting his full potential yet. But looking at the cap situation for New Orleans, it's not a pretty one. They're right on the cusp of the cap before they even re-sign Boogie Cousins. And they have some big cap holds. The only way they could open up a little bit of space is they release some non-guaranteed guys. But overall, I think, the cap situation is not pretty for New Orleans.
Yeah, and I think it'll be interesting. Like, you decide what you want to do, right? And I say that, and what I mean is, New Orleans, Louisiana, football city, football town, football state, right? The basketball team, back when the New Orleans Jazz was there, and sort of LSU basketball, it has a weird history with its basketball team. I think it's a football state, football town first. So getting the buy-in on hoops more, compared to a place like New York or Los Angeles, it's a little tougher. But having said that, they extended Alvin Gentry, and they got something going there. I mean, like I say, Holiday, like Kory was saying, Holiday, premier two-way player in the league, and those things are hard to find. Those are at a premium right now, I think. And it's funny, we were talking just a minute ago about the Rockets. Someone that really could have helped New Orleans, I think, was a Paul George. I watched that team, and I'm sure Preston's written an article about this somewhere. But when you look at that team, I was watching that series against the Warriors, and I was like, what they need? They need Paul George. They need a guy that can knock down shots, take some of that offensive pressure off of AD, and defend Durant and help, and then you move Holiday over to Klay Thompson, for instance, and you have, more favorable matchups. But to the question about the cap situation, where I was going with all that was you kind of have to decide. I mean, this team's on the uptick. Do you sort of go into the luxury tax? I mean, I know they have new ownership now, or, air quotes, new ownership. Do you want to invest in the team to, sort of see if you can take that next level? Or are you kind of in that sort of weird space in the NBA where you're not in the lottery, but you're probably not going to win a championship? So it's actually maybe arguably costing you money to be the fifth or sixth best team in the conference. So it's an interesting time for him, but I kind of am under the opinion if you got something going, then I think you owe it to your fan base and to your organization to see if you can get to that next level.
Yeah, I mean, obviously right now this team is right on the cusp between being at best, a 5, maybe a 4 seed if everyone's healthy, and then all the way down to being just out of the lottery. And I think obviously the cap is an issue. I think you would love to try and move Solomon Hill. He was one of those guys who took the benefit of the cap going up and getting, I think at the time he got like 4 years, $60 million. So you would obviously love to move him, especially because he hasn't been playing. He's been hurt. He plays defense, but he doesn't hit any threes. This team just has a lot of not shooters. So I think you want to try and bring in some cheap guys like that. And obviously you got to try and move Solomon Hill just because you're going to be at least I think the word and everything is that you plan on signing DeMarcus Cousins to near the max.
Yeah, they also could probably move Ajinka too. 5.2, that wouldn't be too hard to move. But overall, they're going to have a tough decision with DeMarcus Cousins. Are they going to be willing to pay him that big money? Is somebody else going to offer him more money? And like kind of Jay said, do they want to move forward with this team? Do they really think they can win a championship, or are they already kind of hit their ceiling moving forward? But team needs.
I think Kory very politely and diplomatically said they have a team full of non-shooters, which is the scariest thing I can imagine in a basketball game. It's just you look down the bench, just a bunch of guys that are non-shooters. But that's kind of where they are. I
think they actually have some solid shooters, though. If you look at the roster, you look at Holiday, Davis, Cousins, Mirotic, Ejuan Moore, Darius Miller, Ian Clark. Those guys can all shoot.
Okay, first of all, that was Kory that said that, so not me. So don't come at me with this.
No, I'm just saying overall, but like for the fact that they do have shooters.
No, well, I mean, yeah, okay, so yes, okay, yes, you got me. You backed me into a corner there. I will take back that statement.
I'll defend. Well, let me defend myself. Right?
You go ahead, because I didn't.
I think if you have to rely though on Darius Miller and Ian Clark to be your bench shooting scorers, you're in trouble. Because Ian Clark, to me, he doesn't play much defense. He's kind of a liability out there. And then Darius Miller, he's young, so he can obviously become something more. But aside from the starters, this bench to me just doesn't have any type of offensive punch.
But they can shoot. Miller and Ian Clark, they can shoot, but they might not have other things in their game. But I think that's two things that those guys can do.
When you say they can shoot, what do you mean they can shoot? Like
Darius Miller, I believe, was shooting like 40% at one point last season, and one of his problems was that he can't do anything but shoot. And Ian Clark, obviously, he's been known to be a three-point shooter for a lot of his career, and that's what he did in Golden State, being a little scoring burst.
Okay, all right, we'll move.
I just want to say Ian Clark shot 41% for 3 this year. So
okay, no, so I would say team needs. I didn't know. I just sort of ended up in that crossfire there. I was just an innocent bystander. But no, I would say team needs. Again, I thought in that Warriors series it was obvious or evident to me that they could use, and we keep saying the phrase, but I think they were really lacking the 3-and-D guy they could have used up in the Paul George type, just someone again to take the defensive pressure. Because like we were saying earlier, like Ariza can play defense and all these guys can play defense, but it's, throwing somebody at KD for 40 plus minutes is a lot. And then asking them to play offense too is really tough. That's one of the reasons it works for Durant, quite honestly, is because you got other guys that can score. So all of a sudden we can say, for instance, oh man, Kevin Durant can really play defense. Well, yeah, he doesn't have to carry the offensive load like he had to in OKC necessarily. But so I think wings are at a premium in this league. I think New Orleans is no different. I think having DeMarcus Cousins, I like the idea of going sort of twin towers and competing against the Warriors in that fashion and letting AD sort of move to a more natural 4 position and having DeMarcus down low on the block, who can he can rim. I think he's a rim defender. I think he's solid. He could be better given his size and ability, but I think he's better than a lot of people. So I think actually having Cousins back in the fold is a way to attack it. One quick thing, I remember there's a story in Bill Simmons' book of basketball where he meets Isaiah Thomas, and he's worried that Isaiah Thomas is going to kick his ass. Isaiah Thomas, Pistons Isaiah Thomas, because he was very critical about Isaiah as a GM with the Knicks. And so they talk about when Isaiah signed Zach Randolph and Eddie Curry. And Isaiah said, well, my thinking was, everybody in the league was going small. I was going small ball. I was going to counter with going big, 2 big guys, which the theory made sense. He just happened to bet on Zach Randolph, knucklehead Zach Randolph at the time before he kind of found his way in Memphis, and Eddie Curry, right? But I think that could work, that formula. It's not crazy. I think that could work in New Orleans. So actually having Boogie back in the fold, I think is probably their best path instead of trying to, rely on Ian Clark for, 3-point shooting, for instance.
I think, to defend Ian Clark, he did shoot 37, 35 the year before. The Pelicans were 13th in the league.
Is this Ian Clark burner account? Are you Ian Clark? What is going on?
I'm just saying, before this career, this season, I don't think he's a bad 3-point shooter. I wouldn't say they're a bad 3-point shooting team, 13th in the league. But back to the point, I think Cousins, you can't afford to lose it. What?
Sorry. Yeah, please.
Boogie, you can't really afford to lose him because you have no other way to get a player of his caliber. You know what I mean? It's not like they have assets to trade for him, a high draft pick. Their pick this year is going to the Bulls. But overall, I think, upgrade-wise, I'm looking at small forward. I think, you kind of hit it with Paul George. They're probably not going to be able to land Paul George, but they might be able to maneuver some other deal where they get a solid small forward, but I think that'd be their major team need.
Right.
Talking team free agents, obviously Cousins, Rondo, Jordan Crawford, and the boy Ian Clark. What are you guys' thoughts on the team free agents?
I think Cousins is signed. I mentioned this before when we talked about the what division are they in? The Southwest. Right, Southwest. Then maybe Cousins could be involved in a sign and trade to Washington, possibly for an Otto Porter Jr. I know that rumor's been out there before. And I kind of think it makes sense for both teams. But I agree with what you said, Jay, about Cousins and Davis being together. It is something that just doesn't happen right now in today's NBA. They're the 2 most talented bigs on the same team. Obviously, everyone's going small. And I've thought this before that I think even though they may not be, title favorites ever, I still think this is the type of team that gives the Warriors the most trouble when they have 2 guys the Warriors can't defend at all for the most part. So I think Cousins could be back, but I wouldn't be surprised if they sign and trade him to, somewhere for a wing. Rondo, I think Rondo comes back because it seems like everyone loves Rondo again. It felt like he had, after going to Dallas, everyone hated Rondo. And then early in Chicago, everyone said he was washed. And then playoff Rondo came. And then now Rondo's back to being loved and respected almost.
It's like him and Gentry have a really nice relationship as well. I think that's one thing, coaching and Rondo haven't gone well in the past, but I think in New Orleans he's found a nice home.
And I think guys like Anthony Davis, DeMarcus, him and DeMarcus Cousins already have a relationship from Sacramento. But I feel like they all understand his basketball knowledge too, and they really, he's a huge addition. Even when he's not on the floor, I don't you guys, the mic'd up stuff they do during games. I love hearing Rondo because even when he's off the court, he's still on the court to a degree. He's the second coach. He's always shouting out what he sees, and I think that's invaluable. Ian Clark, if he wants to come back, they bring him back, but they say shoot 37% again. Jordan Crawford, I think that's, Crawford, Donatos, Holy, Moticianos, and Charles Cook. Maybe those guys comes back, but I don't think it matters. And yeah, I butchered that last name.
I thought you were reading off entree at a restaurant.
We're at a French restaurant right now.
Yeah, and I think that's right. And I think, Nick, you made the point. God, I was caught up in the Ian Clark rapture. But the point of they're not going to get a DeMarcus Cousin based on their cap situation. Although I was going to say and where they are, but New Orleans is one of those spots. I mean, okay, let's just all be adults here. Like, it's where NBA is mostly black. In New Orleans is a place that black players will go. I mean, let's just call it what it is. Let's not, people are like, I don't know if he's like Portland. It's like, what do you mean by that? He wouldn't like Portland. What are you trying to say, right? So, we're all adults here. We're big people. We can understand.
And New Orleans honestly seems like a fun spot. Like everybody who's been there that I've talked to seems to enjoy their stuff when they go there.
Yeah. And not just for the black people. I don't mean to turn this into a race show. I don't know if anybody will hit the comments and be like, oh my God, there's Jay. No one, I don't think. That would be weird on a basketball pod. But, so that's a destination city. I think you're right. It is really fun. It's like Atlanta, LA, New Orleans, places like that. So I just say that because, it's not that bad of a spot to land if you're a player. But I agree that the caliber of DeMarcus Cousins, when he's on, he's still a great player. I mean, I think it's easy to write that very lazy, he's a knucklehead narrative. I think that's just too easy to write. I mean, I would be a knucklehead too if I started my career out in Sacramento and they fired the coach I liked, didn't put anything around me, et cetera, et cetera. So I would be batshit crazy as well. So I think he has a great relationship with the team. I think Rondo resigning is great because I think he flourishes, as Kory, you're saying, in those roles where, he's a veteran. He's been in the finals. He didn't work in Dallas because I think he got there and a bunch of people were kind of telling him what it was, like this is how it's going to be. And Rondo's this vet. He's seen it all. What are you going to tell him that he doesn't already know? So being on a team with a younger squad where he can be this veteran leader, this veteran presence, this guy that's not backing down from the Draymond Greens of the world, I think they need that. And I think to a point you guys were making earlier, and maybe those guys at the end of the bench, you move them out, you get some more vets around Anthony Davis, and you start building the team that way. See if you can get some guys on the cheap that can come in and give quality minutes. I'm thinking, like a Joe Johnson archetype guy that's a veteran that can come in and give you spurts, but you're supporting, and you know very clearly that the star is Anthony Davis, and then, followed by DeMarcus Cousins, but you have a chance to play and be a part of something, an evolving culture in New Orleans. I think that's sort of the route for them, over the next couple of years. And last thing, I'm just going to say, you don't have to, I don't necessarily believe in this idea where you have to scrap it down to the ground, right? If you're in this middle ground, if you're fourth or fifth seed, you got to just tear it all down, sell the assets, and go the Philly route. I don't think it's necessarily the case. I just think when you're in these moments, you have to sort of be smart. You have to be a little more agile, but you also have to be smart with your cap. And you can sort of rebuild on the fly. You can add pieces. You can make decisions. You can make trades. Just don't sell the farm in the process to go for this one title shot. But I think these things can be done without you sacrificing great players and great teams and having to bottom out necessarily. I mean, that's a way to do it, but it's not the only way.
Yeah, especially when you have Anthony Davis. I think that's, the game breaker. If you don't have a superstar or somebody who can really dominate a game and win a game by himself, then yeah, maybe you can consider it. The only thing I'll say about Cousins too is the Achilles injury. Obviously the New Orleans is going to do their homework and see how that looks, and that's going to be a deciding factor in the money amount in the contract, probably in terms of length and amount. But talking trades, obviously DeMarcus Cousins sign-in trade is probably the biggest trade option on the table.
Yeah, and I wouldn't do that deal for Porter. No way. God, no, I wouldn't. If it were me, I wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't sign DeMarcus. I would say, look, can we do a 1-and-1? You can play out next year as your your sort of comeback season. And you do the 1-and-1 deal, and if you hit free agency in 2019 and get your max, then cool. If not, you opt in with us and we can rework it. And it works for both sides. Say, hey, we'll give you 2 years, I don't know, $50 million, and it's a player option after year one kind of thing. That way you can sort of play off this contract. We see what we have here. If you want to opt in, we'll keep going. If not, then you can go elsewhere, and then we'll sort of go from there. But I wouldn't give him like a 4 or 5 year deal. I think that's fair to come at him with sort of the one-and-one scenario. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, why are you so low on Otto Porter Jr.? What's up with that?
I think the contract is probably the issue there.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
contract, the contract more so than like his game. I mean,
I think he's a good fit in terms of actual skill set, but then they would have money locked up. Porter, Drew Holiday, Anthony Davis, and that's pretty much their cap is gone.
Right.
And so, but I think I don't think the deal's dead because I think Washington could sweeten it a little bit if they wanted to put in an Oubre Jr., wanted to include first-round picks or something. But it becomes like I think both sides are in a weird position where neither really holds leverage because Cousins has the Achilles thing. Washington has the big contract. So it's like I don't know if they want to make it work or if they're just like it's like one of those situations where one team thinks they're getting the better end and the other team thinks that they're getting the worst end type of thing. And they just keep going back and forth and they can't really find a medium. Unless like they wanted to get Santaraski involved. I think that'd be an interesting piece as well, but it's tough. Like Cousins' value is the hardest thing to gauge right now because of the Achilles.
See, for me, I don't even think that the Wizards necessarily care about the true value of Cousins. Like if they think he may even, I think they're more so thinking about the fact that the team itself is fluttering. John Wall may not be happy. John Wall has mentioned he wants to play with DeMarcus Cousins. I feel like for the Wizards standpoint, it's about pleasing Wall and just trying to mix it up and add like a star just because
a big three.
You're right, because you've been kind of floundering these last past couple of years.
Right.
Talking free agents.
You just hope that the Pelicans. You just hope that the Pelicans are like, yeah, I guess we'll take on a wing player because you're having two big men, or maybe you hope that the Pelicans aren't as high on DeMarcus Cousins' value. I don't know. I feel like it's a weird thing.
And there's other sign-in trades that we don't have time to mention, but there's definitely some across the board where they could come away with at least a solid piece, especially if you're talking to a team like the Lakers. They're trying to add Cousins and they want you to take on a garbage contract like Luol Deng. Maybe you can get one of those young players. But moving on to free agent targets, what are we thinking for the Pels? Obviously not a lot of space. They might have the mini MLE or they might have the mid-level exception depending on what they do with Cousins or whatnot. But still, at the end of the day, they don't want to go over that tax, I don't think.
I think just a couple of shooters to support Ian Clark would be ideal. No, I think small forward. I think wing defender. I mean, you may have to do it on the cheap and on the fly, but guys that can knock down shots because you're not really getting that offensive production from Rondo from a scoring perspective, obviously. And to support and take some pressure off the double teams for Anthony Davis and or DeMarcus Cousins if he's back in the fold. So I think more scoring is always better than less. So guys to support the bench scoring and then just some length on the wings to help defend just the pterodactyls that roam the Western Conference, right? So
yeah,
I don't have an for you, but that's sort of my thought.
Yeah, I mean it's tough because obviously the money is so small. Like a Doug McDermott, if shooting wise, maybe they get lucky and they go after like a Seth Curry or a. It's just tough because like you said, there's not money, and a lot of these guys I feel like they're not going to want to take a pay cut or take the vet min to come play for New Orleans. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they see Anthony Davis and they see a real opportunity if they surround him. I wouldn't mind seeing like a Marco Bellinelli either. But like Jay said, it's got to be some shooters, and if you can get some guys who can play 3-and-D, that's ideal. But I kind of feel like the 3-and-D guys might be too much for them.
Yeah, I think a lot of their free agent targets are going to depend on ownership and their willingness to go over the tax, go in the luxury tax, what they want to do. And I think that's going to determine who not. If, like you guys mentioned, if they don't want to do that, they're going to have to go at the low-end guys, the veteran minimum guys, maybe some diamonds in the rough. But moving on from New Orleans, talking about the team that's probably been in the news the most the last few days, and that's the San Antonio Spurs, 47-35. Great season. Kawhi only played a handful of games, and LaMarcus Aldridge looked amazing, and they got knocked out in the first round by Golden State. But I think overall they kind of killed expectations considering Kawhi didn't play almost the whole entire season.
Yeah, Kawhi was on the Kyrie Irving Duke plan, right? He played like 9 games, yeah, it was touch and go, I think, for the Spurs this year about whether or not they would, make their 20th straight trip to the playoffs. And they were able to do it. I was impressed with a few of their young guys, a couple of their young guys. I think on the whole, I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was kind of an up and down year for Danny Green, Patty Mills. I think guys that they're reliable. I think you saw like the absence of Kawhi Leonard. I mean, he covered up a lot of things. But like say LaMarcus on the plus side had a great year and really came into his own. I think he was a little uncomfortable last year in San Antonio, obviously, and the stories that came out last offseason about him, not really being happy with his role. But I think he was able to flourish, and I think he gave Golden State all they could handle a lot of times in that series, actually. So, really impressed with Pop and that team to make a playoff run despite missing, a top 5 player in the league.
Now, what a spoiled fan base, 20 straight years.
Well, they just got hit with a hammer yesterday, so we can cut them some slack.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, one of the most well-coached teams in the league. They always have that next man up mentality whenever anything goes wrong. It feels like Manu Ginobili still balling out at the age of 40. I think Pau Gasol, even though he's on the latest part of his career, I think he's really good for that team. And like you mentioned, LaMarcus Aldridge, last offseason won it out. He was done. He said, I don't want to be here. I don't get used right. And Pop sits them down and Pop goes, you're right. This is on me. I have not been using you right. And then, fast forward 4 months to last season or the start of last season, and LaMarcus Aldridge, reinvents himself and looks tremendous. So I think for the Spurs, this was a good year when obviously Kawhi Leonard played 9 games. And now you're just looking to try and get, another. Well, now you're going to need several pieces to try and get back to where the Spurs have always been, and that's at the top of the Western Conference.
And if you are living under a rock for some situation, what we're referring to, it came out yesterday that Kawhi wants out of San Antonio. Top destination is the Lakers. So this has been a relationship that's been kind of messed up with that whole quad injury. And I think there's probably a little more to it that'll come out a little bit later on. But for as of right now, it looks like Kawhi is a sure lock to be gone. Looking at the cap situation, I think a lot of it depends on some player options, similar to, I think, a team like the Clippers, I want to say, had big player options. They have Danny Green at $10 million and then Rudy Gay $8.8 million. So there are 2 big decisions, and that'll kind of impact what will happen. Then also the Kawhi trade, if they're able to get rid of some salary or they're able to take on more depending on the assets they get back, I think that's going to be a big factor.
Yeah, I think there are 2 ways you could probably go about it, right? If you're looking at the cap situation, do you lock these? And I think the first domino to fall, the only domino, quite frankly, is what happens with Kawhi, right? What kind of deal can you get if you are in fact moving him? I mean, I think I think Pop wants to try the LaMarcus Aldridge plan with Kawhi and get him in the room alone without Kawhi's team around, and see if he can work his magic for 2 summers in a row. But if that does not happen, if Kawhi is in fact out, depending on the deal they get, I think you decide, okay, we have this young player. Let's say it's LA, and let's say they get Brandon Ingram and a few other players, maybe Kuzma, or you hold the Lakers' feet to the fire and get some guys. Then I think you say, if you're the Spurs, all right, we got these assets. We maybe got a pick or 2. What do we want to do with these guys around? Do we just kind of want to scrap it and build around, just Brandon Ingram in this example? In that case, maybe we don't re-sign our guys and let them, or they exercise their option and we build around that team and we're sort of starting fresh for the first time in 20 years? Or, do we lock these guys back in and give it one more run with new guys? So I think, but it all, I think, is predicated on what Kawhi Leonard does or what happens with that situation, actually.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they did meet already, Pop and Tim Duncan.
Oh. Well, there was a rumor that they did meet, and then there also came out yesterday that there was another report that Pop and Kawhi have yet to meet.
Oh, okay. Damn, because I had this entire vision of Kawhi and Tim Duncan sitting down, and Tim Duncan going just looking at him like Stonefish going stay, Kawhi going no, and then getting up and leaving, and that would
say okay.
Whatever the case is, obviously this is going to be now the big headline. Obviously, LeBron James is they're basically neck and neck for the top story right now in the offseason. What San Antonio does with this, obviously, the Lakers, Celtics, any of those teams with a ton of assets are going to be calling. They're probably already calling. They might even be on the phone as we're speaking right now. I agree with what you said, Jay, about going after probably a Brandon Ingram in that type of package, getting some kind of young star back, and then you retool around that young star and LaMarcus Aldridge, or maybe you trade Kawhi and then maybe you try and trade LaMarcus Aldridge. I mean, obviously Aldridge is going to be making $26 million in 2019, 2020, which is a lot for a guy who's going to be, I believe, like 34, 35.
He did help his value though this year, I will say. I
No,
think he's a lot.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
No, his value is certainly well above what it was heading into last season. Pau Gasol at $16.8 million next year is really high. I didn't realize he was making that much.
They like to dump him in the Kawhi trade, I think.
Yeah. And who knows? That could be a really nice story, right? Pau Gasol goes back to LA to end his career with Kawhi Leonard. But yeah, I think Kawhi now is officially not going to be a San Antonio Spur. I think we can all somewhat agree on that. And then it's basically about, do they want to now, I think Tony Parker, if they trade Kawhi, is gone. I don't think they bring him back unless he wants to take like a major discount. But it's a weird time in San Antonio because you don't normally see this from them. They're basically going to be going through either a retool or they might actually just blow it up completely after losing Kawhi.
Yeah, and that's kind of lead us to our team needs, where I think we're just going to kind of skip over that because it really all is going to depend on the Kawhi deal and what happens with that. Obviously, if they get young talent, they're going to kind of try to rebuild or something. If they don't, they're going to try to win. They might try to add other pieces. So I think it'd be pointless to kind of talk about team needs. So we'll look at team free agents. Obviously, restricted-wise, Kyle Anderson, David Bertans, and Brian Forbes. What are your thoughts on the restricted free agents? These guys are all pretty solid, and they're Spurs-type players.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think of those three, I think the one I would prioritize is Kyle Anderson. I like his game.
Slow-mo.
And I think he's solid. I think I think I like Kyle Anderson. I like the other two guys too, but I think that's someone you could have in the fold and someone you can. I mean, he's really young as well. Someone you could retool with he and who's my guy Murray, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
DeJounte Murray.
Yeah, those are great young guys to sort of rebuild around, and so I think if keeping him would be a priority for me, I think you'd like to keep all three, of course. But I think the scouting as well. They do a great job of doing that in San Antonio. So keeping those guys in the fold, I think, would be a priority for sure in either scenario going forward, whether you're rebuilding or just trying to retool for another run.
I think Kyle Anderson would be a good guy to keep. Like you mentioned, Nick, all these guys are like prototypical Spurs guys. They just have that kind of system feel. Kyle Anderson, I don't think he does anything exceptionally well, but he does everything decently well. And I think he's another guy you can have, off the bench. He can fill in when somebody's hurt, which he's shown this year when Rudy Gay missed some time, and obviously Kawhi. So I think Kyle Anderson's the guy you want to bring back. Bertans would be the one guy I wouldn't be positive if they'd bring back, but I think they would like to. And then Brian Forbes, he can show that he could be possibly like the next Danny Green. He's a really good shooter, and I actually like his upside.
I'd say bring them all back, especially if you're going to lose Kawhi. They're young players. They have all shown some possibilities of potential. No reason not to, especially in the situation you're in. It's not like you're going after a big fish. If Kawhi was staying and you're trying to get LeBron, then maybe you double think about this. But right now, I think the situation you're in, bring back the young dudes. Talking unrestricted free agent, obviously the big name is Tony Parker. And I think with, like Kory kind of mentioned, with Kawhi probably leaving, most likely leaving, Tony Parker's probably leaving as well, unless he wants to come back for a cheap deal, because I don't think they want to pay him any sort of money.
No, I mean, it just, sometimes the run ends, right? I mean, I think it has been all these imaginations of it, and Tony Parker's there when he's like 18, 19 years old, right, out of France. But, yeah, I think, I think it gets to the business end of this, right? If he wants to take this sort of hometown discount, super, bargain price, then great. And if not, I mean, I wouldn't. You just can't lock. You're in a period of uncertainty, I think, with the team, and I think off the court too. I think the owners are going through a divorce or something like that. So it's an unstable time.
Right there.
Yeah, there you go. It's an unstable time for the franchise, and I think you need, as far as free agency goes, I think you need maximum flexibility because you don't know what the hell's about to happen with the franchise player that you have now. So I think you need that flexibility to map out a plan, and giving Tony Parker a lot of money, giving him the Kobe deal is just, I don't think would be prudent financially to do. So, yeah, I think it's something on the cheap. If not, then thank you for the memories, I think.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. I think unless Pop says, don't leave or something like that, or I don't know. Maybe Manu says, "Do you really want to leave? Like we should all retire a Spur." Like I don't know. It's got to be some kind of like weird scenario like that. But I think he can find a better home.
Moving on to trades, obviously this is going to be the biggest topic of this Spurs portion. Obviously the Kawhi trade and possibly dumping Gasol. I think we'd all agree that top choices are probably Boston, LA, Philly, and then I would say, I know Kory hates this, but I think a dark horse really still is the Clippers, and that's been a team that Kawhi I think has an interest in. But looking at those teams, give me the best trade package for each one that you'd be willing to send out.
Willing to send out. So, okay, so of those teams you named, I think the team that can give them the most is the Boston Celtics. I think the Boston Celtics have, I mean, of course, the Spurs, if I'm the Spurs, I ask for Tatum. If I'm Danny Ainge, I counter with Brown and some of the goodies we got in terms of picks coming up and saying, look, you're losing Kawhi Leonard. You're going to probably be in rebuild mode. Here are all these nice, fancy picks we have. Here's Jaylen Brown, who's a good player. Could develop his thing into a perennial all-star thing, a great player, probably not, maybe top 5 at the end of the day or whatever, but really good player that next tier. Is still really young, 20, 21 years old. You try to hold on to Tatum if you can, but I think Boston can give you the best package. I think LA, and if I'm San Antonio, I say, yeah, I'm not sending you to the team that you want to go to necessarily. I'm going to send you in the East, right? You go far away from here as possible. What's interesting is I think the Lakers are in the best spot for the simple fact that they are the ones that could sign LeBron of those teams you named. So we talk about big free agency stories. If Kawhi goes to the Lakers, that is a big story until 2 days later when LeBron signs with the Lakers because Kawhi is in LA. That becomes the biggest free agency story. So, and if I'm LA, if that scenario can happen, if that is in play where we trade for Kawhi, keep the salary cap intact, sign LeBron, and then go say, hey, Paul George, why don't you come back home to LA? We got LeBron and Kawhi in the fold, and let's build this team and go like Miami Heat, circa 2011 and fill out the roster with veterans on pretty good deals to play with this team. I would do that. And if I'm the Lakers, nobody is untouchable. No effing body. You want Lonzo Ball, you want LeVar Ball, you want Melo, you want Lucille Ball, you want Jerry Ball. Pick a ball and you can have them, San Antonio. Although I don't think San Antonio will want to deal with LeVar. So LA, you give San Antonio whatever they want for Kawhi. Literally whatever they want. If it's Ingram, if it's Kuzma, you give them all that shit for Kawhi Leonard, and you make that happen. So best package, I think the Lakers. The only thing is you trade to a team that you despise if you're San Antonio and you're helping them get better, but he's leaving anyway. So I think you got to do that deal. So I think the best team is the Lakers.
I mean, I love I feel like you are, you got like a giant board in front of you with all these ideas. I think for Celtics San Antonio, I feel like that one's less likely only because, I just don't know. Like, are you gonna really? Would you flip Gordon Hayward after not even seeing him play for a year?
I think an ideal situation for Boston would be to flip a bigger contract in terms of Gordon or Kyrie, because then, you'd prefer to keep Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum because you have them on, smaller rookie deals still, so you can afford the cap. Or so if you were to get Kawhi and then trade away some of the other pieces, now you're stuck trying to pay Al Horford, Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, and Kawhi. So I think it's a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, I think any scenario in which Kawhi goes to the Celtics, one of those 3 guys you mentioned are being moved. I don't see it working any other way, it being worth it any other way, I should say. And maybe because Kyrie Irving has been saying some questionable things in the media. He's not obviously he's got some years left on his deal, but him saying he might not re-sign, him and his quest to prove the Earth is flat. Maybe you just say this guy's a little bit of a nutcase, the knee injuries or whatever. Maybe obviously they just take a risk. I think, like you said, the Spurs, not the Spurs, the Lakers have the greatest asset chest. I think they can give the best package personally to the Spurs. You tie in a Brandon Ingram. I think a Josh Hart would be a guy that Popovich would be interested in having, a guy who plays hard defense. He can maybe will him into something else. And then I don't know who else would you throw in that deal. I mean, if they want, basically,
Luol Deng, if you can, Luau Deng, if you possibly can. The Lakers.
Yeah, they would probably have to put in Deng to make the salaries work unless, they could figure something out. And I think the Lakers are probably throwing a pick, but I agree with you guys because the Lakers have the least amount of risk trading for Kawhi because that's his number one destination.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where all the other teams are like, is he just going to leave us and go sign with the Lakers in 2019? Where if he's at the Lakers, like they were pretty sure he's going to stay there and sign long term. Where Boston, it's a little bit iffy. Then, like I mentioned, the salary cap's going to get ugly. Philly's an interesting team. It depends. I know some people don't believe they have enough assets, but I think they could probably finagle something. And then if you're the Clippers, I think LA is still a possibility being Los Angeles Clippers because they have 12 and 13. They could offer a Tobias Harris or something. It really depends on what the Spurs are looking to do. They want to go full rebuild? Do they want to try to like rebuild and win at the same time? I think it's really going to depend. And then also, is Boston going to be in here? Are they going to, add to this bidding war? Is it going to get higher? Are they going to have to throw out their best offer? Our team's going to be a little bit wary because Kawhi's coming off the injury. Obviously, the off the court stuff, this separation. Was he really injured? Did he just miss time because he wanted to be traded? Is he going to resign with your team? I think there's a lot of question marks, which will hurt the leverage the Spurs have. I feel like anytime it comes out when a player says he wants out, it just hurts all your leverage.
Oh, it's dead. Oh, for sure. Dead in the water. Yeah. I think wherever Kawhi goes, LeBron will follow. So I think we'll put it this way. If Kawhi ends up in the Lakers, LeBron will sign with the Lakers. He's probably going to do that anyway. But if LeBron reads the landscape and says, the most frustrating thing in the world, I think, in that finals was LeBron looking around and saying, I am still the best fucking player in the world. Like, I am better than everyone on this court. Everybody. Like, he will never say it because we would crucify him for it. But he knows, look what this team had to do to stop me. Look what they had to put together to stop me. And I still gave them 50 in game one. LeBron doesn't need Golden State-type teammates to beat Golden State. I mean, if they would have peed a drop, the Cavaliers, it would have been a more interesting series, right? His teammates, right? The Jeff Greens and the J.R. Smiths and Kevin Loves of the world. So
you swap LeBron with James Harden, the Rockets are probably winning a championship, and you know what I mean? So I think he just needs that supporting cast.
And so, and all that to say, if he looks around and says, I can play with Kawhi Leonard, I mean, that's a wrap. If the Lakers can do that, that's where LeBron James will go. And I think that's where, there's reports that Paul George may want to stay in OKC. Stop. If it's LeBron and Kawhi, you go, because the Warriors still exist. It's a world where the Warriors still exist in this universe, in this realm, and you need stars to beat them. And so, if I think that's why the Lakers hold all the cards with the Kawhi trade, because if they can get Kawhi, that is guaranteeing. I put it here, heard it here first. It's not breaking news, but if Kawhi goes to the Lakers, LeBron James will be on the Lakers. And I think Paul George will be there too.
Yeah, when we talked about the Pacific yesterday, or I believe yesterday, the day before, I believe I said that I think the only way Paul George doesn't stay in OKC, because I think right now he's leaning towards staying in OKC. The only way he doesn't stay in OKC is if he knows for a fact he's going to be playing with LeBron James somewhere. Whether that's LA, on the Clippers or the Lakers. Obviously, the Lakers would be the easiest and the preferred destination for Paul George. And I think if you add in a Kawhi Leonard to that discussion, I think without question, those three, as of right now, I think the possibility of those three, Kawhi, LeBron, and Paul George playing together, I would say it's probably, as of right now, because of everything that happened yesterday, I'm going to say it's at like 65% chance. I think the chances are really high right now because of.
Yeah, you could make an argument it's more likely than less likely. And then in the scenario that Paul George didn't want to come for some weird reason that he just loves Russell Westbrook, they still have space to make another move. You know what I mean? They still have other options on the table as well. And I think we'd all agree in terms of active players at the time he played with them, Kawhi would be the best player LeBron has ever played with. Dwayne Wade was great when he went to Miami, but I don't think he had the two-way ability that Kawhi has if he's fully healthy.
It would be the first time in LeBron's career where you would question the fact, is LeBron James the best player on this team?
Right. I would say in 2 to 3 years. I wouldn't say going to this season, I still got LeBron as my best player in the league unless, something happens in the offseason where he falls off the banana boat or whatever.
But there could be months, though, where, like, for example, like, say Kawhi and LeBron are on the same team. Well, let's say, like, LeBron was playing player of the month, in October, and then Kawhi dominates in, November and December. First take is going to be debating whether or not Kawhi is better than LeBron James, and that's
Yeah, they lost
Right.
my viewership a long time ago when they said that they would rather take Tim Tebow over Aaron Rodgers, but that's for another day. I think, but no, I agree in the sense that like during the regular season, you could see Kawhi have possibly a better regular season than LeBron, and then LeBron just goes Super Saiyan in the playoffs, and then they beat the Warriors. I think this is the best scenario for him to go to the Lakers. His Kawhi is there, so that's why if you're Magic, you're just like, all right, what do you want, San Antonio? I know you guys hate us, RC Buford and Pop. Like, I know you don't want to make this deal, but we can help you more than anybody else can help you, and we're more willing to help you than Boston is because we don't have any worries because we have such an open book.
Because they'll want Tatum, right? Like if you go, they take Brown, but if they were doing so, because they want Tatum. Anybody would want Tatum. I would want Tatum. That guy.
I think they could do it without Tatum, though. If they were to offer Rozier, Brown, and then offer the 2 picks they have coming from Memphis and the Clippers next year, and then if they wanted to throw in one of their own,
you would need to put in more money for that. You still wouldn't be able to on the money side.
They would need to find out a way to make the contracts work. But I think they probably could. I mean, Danny Ainge is another guy who's very smart, knows what he's doing. So,
right.
And the one thing for Kawhi, I don't think his contract is like completely ridiculous. It's 20 this year. So I think, if they were to move Brown, which is like 5.1, and then Rozier, which is 3, that puts him at 8, and then maybe throw in Marcus Morris. But
hey, Ryan Anderson's making 20s. That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, Ryan Anderson, Kawhi straight up. I think we got it. They got a couple non-guaranteed contracts.
Maybe they do something too, where maybe they sign Marcus Smart and it's a sign and trade of Marcus Smart goes to San Antonio. Because I don't think Pop would hate the fact of having a guy like Marcus Smart on his team.
Yeah, I could see that too. That's like another thing that's been mentioned on the Twitter sphere. But moving to free agent targets, I mean, there almost is really no point in talking about it because we don't know what's going to happen with Kawhi. If they were going into the rebuild and they're just trying to add talent, I think that they should just probably dump, try to go for some of the restricted guys, if that's a Jabari Parker maybe, or I think if they want to go for the young route or if they want to stay competitive, there's other guys they can make moves for, but it's really tough to say with the whole Kawhi situation.
If Pop could get Kawhi back into the fold, do you see a path where they could go after LeBron James after that?
If they were to keep Kawhi in the fold, yeah, I definitely do. I was actually, it's a funny story. I was talking to one of my friends and I broke the news to him that Kawhi was going to be traded and he wanted out. And I swear to God, my friend was like literally angry for like the next 3 hours. Like he was really mad. And then because the day before we were just talking about how like, San Antonio, LeBron and Kawhi, like that would make a ton of sense. Even if they had to move Aldridge or something to make it work, I think that would have been a great fit. But obviously right now it doesn't look, with all the reports, I feel like there's just too many issues right now for Kawhi to stay in San Antonio.
Yeah, and he even came out and said he doesn't care about the Supermax now. Like, yeah, he's at the point where it just sounds like there's no reconstructing this bridge between him and San Antonio. It's completely fallen down, and there's no way to repair it.
And not to mention, like people are making a big deal. He's not taking a Supermax. I think it's like he's losing $31 million, but that's $31 million he can make in endorsements very easily moving to a bigger city, moving to LA or hypothetically New York or like Boston or something. Like there's just going to be a lot more pop in terms of endorsement. And I believe he signed with Jordan Brand.
Yeah.
Like there's just a lot of options.
His off the court brand too, I think within the last year or so has been building. He has a shoe on the like somewhat in the works. He made
a trip to Asia last year.
Yeah. Like he's got the claw shirts and everything else. I think his off the court brand is finally building too, which might be another reason why he wants out of San Antonio because you just don't get that kind of recognition there.
I think that's the main reason he wants out. His team is pushing him out in a sense. I think the relationship isn't pretty, but also the fact is that the team realizes like, all right, in San Antonio, Kawhi's never going to get a chance to be his full level Kawhi that we possibly could see in being you could make an argument when LeBron kind of, dwindles down and isn't longer the best player. Kawhi could be the best player in the NBA. He could compete with KD for being the best player, him and AD.
Sure, of course. I think, and that's funny too, the one last thing on the Supermax, I didn't think about that, but with him, I think that's probably the thing that people aren't necessarily focusing on, but the biggest indicator to me that, like you're saying, Kory, where there's smoke, there's fire, because he's not negotiating for more money, right? So the Supermax is there. He just has to sign it. Like that number's not going to change. He can't negotiate for more or less. But the fact that he knows it's on the table, like it's not a negotiating ploy, right? It's not trying to get an extension. It's, hey, the Supermax, we can offer it to you. You go sign it. Cool. The fact that number is set and he's like, nah, I'm good. That's not even an issue for me. I think that more than anything is probably the biggest indicator that he's probably done in San Antonio. Like, I mean,
not to mention if the injury is serious, you're turning down that amount of money.
Exactly. Right.
So
Whereas, yeah, you'd sign that thing tomorrow. Whereas, like Melo, Melo would. We were talking, Melo earlier, and we were like, oh yeah, he hadn't signed yet. But I think that exit interview, Melo made it pretty clear. He's like, I'm coming back, and I'm starting, and I'm here for $28 million. There's not shit you guys can do about it.
Maybe if they all go to LA, he takes a major pay cut to go play as a bench role for the Lakers.
I don't think LeBron makes his ass there, but that's just me. But that wraps
it
up
up
for
for
the Spurs.
now, right?
And we may be dropping a Spurs trade pod soon, so keep an eye out for that. So moving on from the Spurs, we're going to talk Dallas Mavericks, 24-58. Another losing season for the Mavericks. A ton of injuries across the board. Dirk didn't look too great in that season. Dennis Smith Jr. had some solid moments. What were your thoughts on the Mavs last season?
I think the decline, I don't even know if it's the decline necessarily. There were, the free agent plan for Mark Cuban, it just hasn't worked out. And this has been, and I say that for the last maybe 5 or 6 years, this roster sort of put together. Dirk is obviously at the end of his career and has been acknowledged by everyone. Wesley Matthews is not quite the same player he was in Portland. Nerlens Noel comes over, and he's clearly looking for the next option for him this offseason. It's just a bunch of mash of pieces. I never thought I'd see a Mark Cuban team with 20 wins or anything like that. The one bright spot, of course, being Dennis Smith Jr., but they were just all over the place this year, I thought.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Mark Cuban, every year, it feels like the Mavs are tied to some sort of big free agent. They try to bring in somebody, but they seem to miss. Wesley Matthews got a huge deal, and obviously the Achilles injury he suffered has definitely had some sort of effect on his body. I think you can make that clear and evident. And then you just look across the board. It's a team with a lot of older guys, like a lot of vets still, and not a ton of young talent. I mean, Harrison Barnes, I think, was slightly overpaid, but if he becomes, a slightly better offensive scorer, then I think it's worth it. Like you mentioned, Dennis Smith Jr., I think that was the solid draft pick because, obviously he's got a ton of upside, and we saw some glimpses and some flashes from him. But overall, it's funny that the Mavericks won a title, 6 years ago now or 7 years ago. And, since that year, they really have been just going the wrong way in the Western Conference.
It's weird, right? Like we talked about, because Cuban, we talked about it for that 2011 title, that he was dead set on not being that guy that had bloated contracts and overpaying guys, right? He didn't keep that team intact. That was by design. He kind of let that team guys go other places and said, I'm not going to be cash strapped. I'm looking for this big free agency summer coming up, and he has yet to hit big on the blackjack table. And it's kind of ironic because now what we see is, like you said, with the Wesley Matthews contract, Harrison Barnes, he probably arguably overpaid for. Just a lot of bad deals. He became sort of what he was sort of fighting against back in 2011. It's kind of ironic to watch.
Yeah, it is. And you mentioned just like some of the bad deals and the Wesley Matthews thing, and then the whole DeAndre Jordan, being held hostage at his house thing of that offseason. Feels like the Mavs are always tied. And talking about that cap situation, they can have up to $35 million. They have a lot of restricted free agents. So they have a team option on Dirk. So there's a lot of options for the Mavs and cap space wise. What do you think of their cap situation?
I think they're closer to the bottom than they are to the top. And, we were just talking Spurs and keeping people around and sort of being able to right the ship on the fly. And then with New Orleans, similar type deal. I think the Mavericks should go crater mode. I mean, they could potentially have that $35 million. I say, clean your books, get the cap, get as much under the cap as you can. And start to sort of look at building around Dennis Smith Jr., who, by the way, I don't know, maybe we can have this discussion. I think he's good, but I don't know if I put him I think he's all rookie team. I'm just wondering where you put him in terms of the rookies, because I was going to say build around him, and I'm not sure if he's the guy, right? Because I think Tatum could be the guy. Right, I think you saw Tatum play in Boston. He could be the guy. I think Simmons obviously could be the guy. Who's my man in Utah?
Donovan Mitchell.
Donovan Mitchell, thank you. Same type deal. I wonder, I mean, Dennis Smith, I feel like is right there, but I don't know if he's quite that. But I'll let you guys answer on that part. But in terms of the cap, I say you go crater mode. I think you go process Texas style for Dallas. I think that's the only way, the way out of this right now.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you need to try and get rid of. I mean, at least luckily, after next year, they don't have anyone on the books really.
Right.
That's the one benefit is that the cap situation does get really open. I mean, obviously, I think Harrison Barnes accepts that player option in 2019, 2020 for $25 million, and probably Dwight Powell too for $10 million. But again, Dwight Powell is rather young, I think. Wesley Matthews out from underneath him after next year. I mean, I think that's the benefit, right? And Mark Cuban, the guy who's also crapped on teams for tanking, is now tanking himself. And I mean, I think if you're the Mavs, you might as well tank. I mean, you're going to want to tank. Maybe you can move Wesley Matthews, but if I recall, last deadline he was trying to move Wesley Matthews. He was demanding a first-round draft pick for Wesley Matthews.
Good luck with that.
Like, you're not getting rid of Matthews for $18.5 million, excuse me, and getting a draft pick, a first-round draft pick. Like,
you got better luck attaching a first-round pick.
Yeah. So
they should trade for Ryan Anderson. I don't know.
That's maybe the only good swap. I mean, then they're still taking on that contract, but
yeah.
So who is the? And I think that, and we say tank, and I think that's right. And I think it is hilarious that Mark Cuban's in this position, given his position on tanking, self-righteous position, I think, in some respects. But we just talked about it, though. Do you think, Kory or Nick, will that work? Does anyone go to Dallas? That hadn't worked. It's Dallas, it's Texas taxes. For millionaires, it's the greatest place to live. But it hadn't worked. It didn't work with Dwight Howard. Didn't work with Chris Bosh. I mean, DeAndre Jordan, as you say, until a crime was committed, it was working. But but would that? I mean, even if they get 60, 70 million under, they got Dennis Smith Jr. and they have empty books, but no one goes there. It hadn't worked in 7 years. No one goes to Dallas.
And I think the issue is, obviously, I don't want to say this because I really don't know, but there's nothing going on in Dallas. Like there's no. No, sorry. Yeah, there's not like a culture. I know Dallas won a title, but I don't see like there being a culture there really.
And they had the whole front office thing with the sexual harassment,
exactly, like
domestic violence thing.
I think Dallas in general is just a place where people don't look at right now, especially like since that Tyler run, the team has gotten progressively worse and worse.
Right.
And if Dirk was maybe in his prime still, it'd be different, but. You look at this roster, like you mentioned, Dennis Smith Jr. and Harrison Barnes are like the only two guys really that are locked into the future right now. And if you're, let's say a LeBron James or even a DeAndre Jordan's a free agent again this year, are you looking at that team and going, oh, yeah, I definitely want to play with Harrison Barnes, Dennis Smith Jr.? Like, no. I mean, those aren't even on your top 5, and they might not even be in your top 10 of destinations. So I think for Dallas, it's like you said, it's got to be kind of like a Philly situation where you're tanking and you're getting draft picks, and hopefully, you get a couple other young studs, and you can then, trying to attract the big fish that Mark Cuban always wants to have.
Yeah, I think a development is going to be a big thing. How does Dennis Smith Jr. develop? And Kory mentioned is Harrison Barnes take another step. If I'm them, I'm like, they might take a couple swings. They're restricted free agents because they're not such a hot destination. They might be a get away overpaying a guy like a Julius Randle, or they could be a team that could take on Hassan Whiteside, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I think what I would do if I was them, I would just kind of go after some young guys, try to develop, build up some nice complementary pieces. If I'm not able to get that star, keep my cap flexible, and then I have a solid roster that kind of attracts a good player. Right now, there's just like a whole bunch of nothing, and it's like they don't have the same pop that the Lakers have when they have no cap space. You know what I mean? And that's the issue. I think Mark Cuban doesn't really see that. And some of it could be I'm not that familiar with Dallas, Texas. I'm not familiar, with that area as much. I know Jay probably knows it a little bit better than me, but I just feel like the pop isn't there. Dallas is a big-time city, but I just don't know if there's just as much excitement around that team. It just feels like it's such like a Cowboys, like, you think of Dallas, you think of the Cowboys. You don't really think of the Mavs. So –
yeah, and Cowboy. So that's exactly right. So it's Cowboy country for sure. And then in terms of Texas basketball, the Triangle, they've been third. Like when I was a kid, I was growing up in West Texas, so all of our big, major news came from Dallas, right? Where everyone in my hometowns, Rangers, Dallas Stars, Dallas Cowboys, and Mavericks, but the Mavericks were awful for so long. Like, this run that they've had is only recent with Cuban's ownership, right? They don't have this history like the Rockets or the Spurs even. It's all pretty new. So, yeah, the fan base has been there because of Dirk and the run they had for a while. But, yeah, historically speaking, they were a laughingstock, like an absolute laughingstock. So I think, like you say, a good comparison with the Lakers. When there's down times, you know, LA is like Laker town, right? Laker Dodger town for sure. But Dallas, it's like when a team is kind of a sudden rise and then they're down again, it's like, well, we weren't really rocking with y'all anyway. We're kind of watching because you were good for the stint. But once it goes down, you know, I don't think people are as into it as they once were. So who knows?
Moving on from there, what are you guys thinking team needs wise?
A team is the need. Yeah, I think it's I didn't even think about Julius Randle or Hassan Whiteside, and we'll talk about that some more, I guess. But I think it's possible, and I don't know. It's kind of like the Spurs. You can't really say because they're with their Kawhi situation. But Dallas, it depends on what the strategy is, right? Because I do think they're in full rebuild mode. But I think you could get a front court together on the fly fairly quickly for Dallas. I think Julius Randle, I think he's transformed his game to the type of player that is sort of that Draymond mold, where there's this tweener that can defend positions, that can score. I think he actually has a little more offensive punch, Randle does, than someone like a Draymond Green. I think comparatively, if I needed a bucket, I think I would go to Julius Randle before I went to Draymond, actually. But so I think maybe a front court need if you're trying to get something around Dirk on this last run. I don't know if I'm excited about Hassan Whiteside's money, but I think more the front court. I think back court is kind of fortified. I mean, Matthews isn't a complete scrub, and then you got Dennis Smith Jr., Harrison Barnes kind of floats between a 2 and a 3. So I think power forward, center, those kind of looks. But honestly, I'm more like clean the books. Like, we have to have a minimum number of players. That's what we need, so we don't get kicked out of the league. But otherwise, yeah, I'd leave that alone until the next summer, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think a team need would be just to, you know, like Nick said, attack a restricted free agent. You know, maybe get a Julius Randle, a Jabari Parker, or a Zach LaVine. You know, swing high. You know, worst comes to worst, you made another team, you know, have to pay big salary for one of those guys.
Mess up their cap.
Right. So I think for Dallas, the movement has to be youth.
Yeah.
You know, Dirk Nowitzki, if he never played again in the NBA, although it would be sad, I don't think I'd miss it. It's not like I enjoy watching Dirk play anymore. Honestly, I think I mentioned this before. When he walks on the court and moves around, it looks like his entire body hurts. Like, he just looks uncomfortable.
Hurts to watch.
It's no disrespect to Dirk, because Dirk was one of my favorite players growing up, and he's been phenomenal, and he still can bring you know, an offensive night here and there. But I mean, defensively, he ain't gonna give you nothing anyways at this stage in his career. But
he gave
I
us
think
maybe the best picture of the NBA last year with Isaiah Thomas and him next to each other.
That's one of my favorite Twitter headers to put up. It's occasionally I throw that one up there because it brings me some joy every time I go to my page.
I thought it was a shop the first time I saw it.
Yeah. It does. It really does.
So I think that's got to be the team need, just to get young. And you know, maybe we'll talk about some trades, but I think it's the need in general is to get younger.
Yeah, talent. Just talent, you know, young talent, get that in there in a direction. You know, this is something we mentioned on some other teams, not only talent, but decide on what the plan is. I don't really know what the plan is. Obviously, maybe inside the front office, they have a better idea, but from the looks of it, it doesn't seem like they're sure if they want to go into the youth route, or like Jay's mentioned, Mark Cuban just trying to sign big time free agents. It's not really working. So I think you got to come up with a new plan. Free agency wise, a lot of restricted free agents, Doug McDermott, Yogi Ferrell, Aaron Harrison, and Mirza. Mirji, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but he's actually a solid center. But restricted free agent wise, who do you think they keep?
Oof, I think they're all too rich for their blood. Everybody you named on that list, I just can't. I can't see it, man. I don't know. Like, if you had like maybe Dirk. I'm trying to think of a comparable team or comparable star, but I think it's maybe Dirk 2-3 seasons ago. You keep those guys in the fold, and then you maybe I don't know. I think they can all walk. If they can all get money somewhere else, then so be it. I think you, like to your point a second ago, Nick, maybe they don't know where they're going, and that could play out in free agency. If they sign those guys, it looks like they're trying to keep it together for one sort of farewell tour for Dirk, or are they trying to tank? Like they're a team in flux right now. So none of those guys really jump off the screen at me in terms of let's tie up some money with these guys. I mean, shit, no, you're not going anywhere anyway. So why, if they can get their money elsewhere, then thanks for the memories, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think you only bring them back if it's worth it in a cap space area. I mean, I think they'd like to bring back Yogi. I think he had a nice stint down there with them.
That's right.
And I think, Doug McDermott, if he's cheap, they might have some interest just because he is a shooter, and that's what you need in today's.
His qualifying offer is 4.3, which is interesting. I mean, it's probably about what he'll get paid probably by another team. So it's like, do they want to? Someone could offer him more too. It's hard. McBuckets is like he's had a weird NBA career. I feel like he's been in situations like you expected more in OKC, and that never really popped up. And Mesri, I think I got his name right this time. He's been like a solid rim runner at times, a good backup big, but like you said, just like a guy you'd probably keep on the cheap. And then they're unrestricted free agents. Nerlens Noel, that dude is gone. He was eating a hot dog during a game, and like that just the relationship with Carlisle just never worked. The worst part is like statistically when he was on the court the previous season, the numbers were great. And then this year he like literally didn't play. Seth Curry's a weird guy too, because coming off the injury, is someone going to offer him big money because he can shoot, and he's proven to be a solid guard in the league.
Do you think Rick Carlisle is safe? What is your opinion, I guess, generally more broadly on retaining a coach or firing a coach? I feel like things are stale in Dallas. I think it's I think the champagne still kind of smell it from the championship years, and they brought back Barea and Dirk's still around, but I just feel like it's stale. And then part of me is like, well, sometimes you just got to shake it up and start from the beginning. And then other part of me is like, well, Carlisle's been there. Like you're not really in a plan right now, unless he comes in and says, I'm not really feeling a rebuild kind of thing. But what do you guys think about like getting rid of Carlisle and just sort of scrapping it and starting like tearing it all the way down to the studs and then going with it, like sort of like Boston did with Brad Stevens. Maybe you find the young coach and he goes through his growing pains with the young guys and finds his way. And then as we build up and we make our move, you're sort of rewarded for going through that. Like, do you think an NBA championship coach is what you need in this situation? Or do you say, let's try it and let's get some energy in here. We're going full youth movement from the court, on the court to off the court with our coaching staff. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I'm not against it. I obviously think like it depends. Like, for example, like some coaches I don't think get a long enough stint to like Frank Vogel in Orlando, for example. But like that's obviously a terrible situation. And you're looking at Rick Carlisle, like obviously he's got the title. He's been there what feels like forever, right? It's got to be 10 plus years. I mean, the last coach, Avery Johnson or whatever his name is.
Yep.
Right. So I'm not against it. I think it wouldn't be the worst idea for them to get into a movement. You have to gut this team. You have to bring in, younger talent. Maybe it's time just to go from a hole and just get an entirely new group of guys, starting from the head coach. I wouldn't be against it. I think you're right. The team could use a jump push, but I don't think you get rid of Carlisle probably until after Dirk leaves. It's just my feeling.
Yeah, I feel like him and Cuban have a pretty good relationship where Carlisle will still be there. It might be the right move. It might be, honestly, the right move to get rid of Dirk, but that would never happen because, it's kind of disrespectful and he's already taken pay cuts trying to help you get bigger free agents. But I think, a player development staff, something like Atlanta's doing where they're just trying to develop young talent, things along that line, Kenny Atkinson like in Brooklyn, I think just having player development type coach might make more sense. If Carlisle wanted to leave and go to a different system, and like Kory said, he's been there for about 10 years. So it could be time for a change, but I just don't see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
Trade-wise, though, I think this would be a team that, in my opinion, would be interested in taking on a quote-unquote bad contract for a good player, like somebody we've mentioned, like an Otto Porter, maybe somebody like an Andrew Wiggins, a Hassan Whiteside. What are your thoughts on the trade market for the Mavs?
I think the Mavs would – go ahead, Jay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Kory.
Go ahead. No, this is your turn. Go ahead.
I think that's interesting. I think it's them as potential suitors and trade facilitators makes the offseason interesting, right? I think if they're a destination where you can get guys and move money, more importantly, that makes them relevant for the offseason, the ability to absorb some of those contracts, and that would lend itself more to where it gets tricky. I think where we're talking about restricted free agents, if you take on a Hassan Whiteside or someone else's money, Otto Porter, for instance, then you kind of build around for Dirk on the fly for the last season, what I assume would be the last season, and which is fine. And maybe you go from 24 wins to maybe 34 in a loaded Western Conference, but then Dirk retires, and then you're stuck with Hassan Whiteside or Andrew Wiggins or whoever. So, I mean, if you're looking at it from a long game perspective, and maybe like we were talking about, maybe it goes Nick the player development route, and so you're like, we'll live with Hassan's Whiteside deal because we're not going to be good for a couple of years anyway. Maybe I pull the lever on this and facilitate some trades and give Dirk a little help in his last year, and then we sort of deal with the fallout because we're in rebuild mode after that point anyway. Maybe you go that route, but I think it's hard. I think you gotta avoid the shiny thing if you're Mark Cuban, and commit to, ironically, the thing that he wailed against the last couple of seasons. Commit to this rebuild, I think.
And I think it also, sorry to cut you off, Kory, it'd be, Whiteside I have a hard time gauging, but I believe Porter and Wiggins still have more to unlock in their game. Both those guys, I believe, can be better players in a different role. So it'd be like a little bit of, we're more competitive now, but all right, maybe I really believe in Otto Porter. Maybe I really believe in Andrew Wiggins. Not that long ago, we thought Andrew Wiggins was, coming out of the draft, going to be one of the best players in the NBA, a top 10 type talent. And things just haven't worked out in Minnesota. Has that been coaching? Has it been the front office? Has it been teammates? Is the situation? I think a new place for Wiggins would definitely help him out.
Well, yeah, and I think in this scenario, Barnes is still there, right? So it wouldn't be terrible to have a Harrison Barnes and Andrew Wiggins, future.
Mid-range for life.
I like that though. So you say Dennis Smith Jr., Harrison Barnes, Andrew Wiggins. I mean, that's great defense on the wings. That's what you need when, people are shooting 30-foot shots and, we're running off the screens and pick and rolls. I mean, although, I think we sort of could all agree that Andrew Wiggins as a 3 and D, the D has not been.
Hasn't been there. But the potential is there still, I think.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. No, that I agree with. I mean, hell, he's only, 22, 20, 21, something like that. So, but yeah, I didn't think about that. That actually, I'm not as down on that. I agree. I would probably, I think Hassan Whiteside, I think that'd be sort of radioactive to do. But I'm not opposed to Wiggins or Porter. I think I like Wiggins a little more in that situation in my head than I do Porter. Although I think Porter probably has a little more box office appeal than Wiggins. I think he could probably be better than Wiggins. Probably is right now. Actually, I'd take Porter over Wiggins.
Yeah, I think Porter's better now. He's more complete. Yeah, and he has a higher floor so Wiggins, you're just banking on the potential of maybe just things mentally just weren't working in Minnesota. And also, if Minnesota, I could pull up their cap real quick, but I think you could even send back Harrison Barnes, which would be more of a complementary player that wouldn't mind taking a backseat a little bit more than someone like Andrew Wiggins, and then maybe taking on another bad contract in exchange or something along those lines. I think there's a couple different avenues where the Mavs could work. If you have cap space, it doesn't always mean you need to sign a free agent. You could work it in trades, especially in this day and age where cap is only available for a handful of teams this offseason.
Well, then if you do that for Minnesota can play Harrison at the small ball 4.
Exactly.
And then you can have, a Towns, Barnes, Jimmy Butler, and then, Tyus Jones and Jeff Teague backcourt if you wanted to go someone small in that area.
Yeah, or you fill in, you get somebody in the, in the 2-guard spot you sign or anything, and it could open up their books a little bit, especially with Towns' big contract incoming. I think this wouldn't be a terrible spot for Andrew Wiggins either, and I think this would be an area where he could kind of see if he's a star. I think his problem with Minnesota right now is he feel like he doesn't have the opportunity to kind of, showcase his skills to a complete level. If he went to Dallas, Dennis Smith Jr. is going to have the ball a lot, but it's not like he's going to take all the shots. Same thing with Harrison Barnes if he were to stay.
Right.
So, and in Whiteside thing too, they had some interest in Whiteside when he was a free agent. Obviously, you could get Whiteside almost for free now, probably because his value is at the lowest it'll probably be unless it gets lower from here on out. But also they could look at it too. Sorry to cut you off, Jay. They could look at it we don't want another guy like Noel because Whiteside obviously has his issues, who just complains when he doesn't play in the fourth quarter, and he thinks it's all on the coach when he doesn't perform on the floor.
Right. I was going to say, man, there's an article to be written about Dallas's quest for a big, right? You can start with Dwight Howard and Chris Bosh. They got Nerlens, Hassan White, DeAndre Jordan. There is a 5-6 year window where Dallas is just, fishing.
Since they
literally.
traded Tyson Chandler.
Since they traded Tyson Chandler, that's exactly right. That is, yeah, maybe I'll write that article. Who knows?
Oh, I like it. Inside scoop on the outlet.
Big man article coming.
But talking team targets, in the Hawking, obviously they can have the possibility to have a lot of cap space. They could go after a ton of guys, from a Clint Capela to a DeMarcus Cousins to a Julius Randle to a Derek Favors. Where do you think they go in free agency?
I feel like this is one of the teams that's going to be a dark horse for DeMarcus Cousins. You know, if his value was to slip at all,
They'd offer him full max, I think.
Yeah, I think Cuban full-heartedly would give him all the money and more that he would ever want. Just because, as we mentioned, he's missed on all the big fish. This guy could be, you know, still is, you know, a top 3 big in the league, even if he is, you know, not 100%. You know, even if he's, you know, 80% of what he was, he's still going to be better than the majority of the centers still in the league. So I think it wouldn't be surprising if we went after him. And like we mentioned, the restricted free agent, you know, the Zach LaVine, Jabari Parkers, Julius Randles, younger guys, which I think would be smarter. But I don't know if Cuban is fully with us on what he should be doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, and that's interesting with DeMarcus Cousins. I mean, you kind of sell him on, in that situation, could be totally cynical here. I think money would talk there, because Cousins would have to know that he's going into, a Sacramento type situation, right? Like the build is going on.
Well, it might be better though. Sacramento, I think, is
I
more
think
toxic.
I think it's better though, because you have Harrison Barnes and you have a young Ben Smith Jr. They do have the 5th pick in the draft still.
Yeah, good point. That's fair. I rescind that comment. Yeah, I think that could be interesting. I think that could be the spot where, yeah, Cousins probably doesn't have to prove himself with the 1+1 like we're talking about in New Orleans, or any other situation where I think teams would be hesitant to send that money. And I mean, just as I said a second ago, here's another big trying to come to Dallas, right? And Mark Cuban's like, yeah, I like that role of Dallas being sort of a dark horse to get Cousins if he sort of looks at the landscape and teams are sort of nickel and diming him because of his injury. And Cuban says, look, we'll open up the books. This is what we're building on. This is what we have. We either have this pick or we can flip that pick to get you some more help. That's interesting, actually. I didn't think about that, but that's I like that. I like that destination for him.
Yeah, and I think not only him, big man wise, I could see them offering Clint Capela a big contract. Julius Randle, like you mentioned earlier, Jay. Joseph Nurkic would be another guy that probably is not going to get a ton of offers if they wanted to add a center. Even Aaron Gordon could be a guy they consider. I think they might just take a couple swings at anybody because, like we mentioned, Cuban's always tied to big free agents, and he's going to try to get a big fish if he can. But moving on to maybe the most exciting team in the NBA, the Memphis Grizzlies. No, I'm sorry for all the Memphis fans out there. That was a low blow. 22-60. And it was, and the worst part is it started off like a really good season. I believe they beat the Rockets like twice early on or something. They were off like 8-5, 8-3. Then Mike Conley went down, and literally everything just went sour real quick. As soon as Conley went down, the whole season changed. David Fizdale was out early on. Him and Gasol didn't agree. Gasol did not look like the player that we thought he was this season. What are your thoughts on the season the Grizz had?
I will say that it is hard out here for a pimp, and Grizzlies are no exceptions. I think, man, where do you start? Like on this season, Conley goes down, and it's just, oh man, I can't wait till we get to the contract talk on this team because holy cow. But it was disappointing to say the least. I feel like the NBA, I mean, yeah, there were a ton of injuries on this team, but God, I also feel like the NBA just kind of passed this team by. I think the Grindhouse, it was, sort of that old Chris Rock joke. It was grand opening, grand closing, man. It was, I might have lost for words. Kory, you take it. I can't.
Life comes at you fast, right?
Fast, super fast.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Conley was the highest paid player in the NBA a few short seasons ago. You gave Chandler Parsons a ton of money. Marc Gasol obviously is making decent amount, good money too. And then, you got Tyreke Evans on the cheap, and he looked like he was really good last year, career year, honestly. And then the injuries fall apart, and then this team collapses after just passing on Zach Randolph and Vince Carter, and which I think was right. You had to let those guys go. They were getting up there in age. I think that was the right decision,
especially with the money that Sacramento paid them.
Right. So that all made sense. And then, of course, the injury bug hits, and then you become what you were, which is hot garbage. And then, of course, I don't know if you guys heard, but the what's his name, Robert Pera, the owner of the
Grizzlies. Yeah, he sometimes participates in the celebrity game on All-Star Weekend.
Yeah, he said that this team could win 50 games next year. So I guess we're not seeing what he's seeing because he thinks this is a 50-win team if Mike Conley comes back healthy.
50 loss
basketball games? 50 basketball games? Or what?
Yeah. So
I think he's talking about the esports team. No.
Yeah. Oh, maybe there's something that's possible. No. Yeah. So for the Grizzlies, it was obviously rough. You took what you could get. You saw some nice moments from, Dylan Brooks, I guess, was probably like the highlight. Marshawn Brooks, too, your guy, when he came over. I guess if you have the last name Brooks, it was a good year for Memphis. But
dog, that's the best part of last season for the Grizzlies. Marshawn Brooks came back and he dropped I don't even know. He dropped 20 in 3 or 4 straight games, and he just looked like a natural born scorer out there. That was awesome.
Yeah, and Dylan Brooks, I think, was a nice rookie piece. And even though he's off his rocker, I saw him tweet at LeBron saying, "Come to Memphis." Like, you moron, he ain't going to Memphis.
He's a tough kid too. I like Brooks. I think he's a good piece moving forward. And like you mentioned, Tyreek Evans, he had a really nice season. It got to the point where they thought it was a lock to be traded, and they sat him for 2 weeks, and they didn't end up trading him, which was just a weird moment. But
the issue is they wanted a first-round pick for him, and no one was going to give a first-round pick to a guy who was about to get paid the next offseason.
Yeah, and especially on that contract without giving anything back. Kory, it's funny is because on the NBA Outlet preview of the Grizzlies, we said worst-case scenario was Mike Conley getting hurt, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, we were right on that. We said that was a team that was going to struggle, and then we said, God forbid injuries happen, it's over, and
what happened?
It happened.
Over. Hey, with Marshawn Brooks, you guys or Nick, you're the Brooklyn aficionado. I feel like that was the issue with the Dwight Howard trade way back when, that they didn't want to give up Marshawn Brooks when he was coming out.
No, they were. They were willing. That trade was literally completed about 257 times, and then all of a sudden it just didn't happen. I can't tell you how many times I got notifications that Dwight Howard to Brooklyn was a lock to happen. Yeah. And looking back at that trade, if they made that trade, that would have been a terrible trade for the Nets too, but it would have prevented the Boston trade. So I don't even know what to think about it. But and the Dwight after Orlando went really bad, but who knows? You put Dwight and Darren Williams together, maybe they both don't turn off terrible. The Nets still are playing Darren Williams now, but that's for another day. Cap situation here is ugly. It is ugly. Especially for a team that did not make the playoffs. There's no space. They could get really close to the tax, and they have the Chandler Parsons contract. Conley's contract is big, but I don't mind paying him because he's a great two-way player. Gasol's the guy that didn't look right last year, and everyone else just Ben McLemore making $5 million is kind of ugly. Jermichael Green, he didn't get much better last year either. So I just a ton of contracts for the Grizz that you're not a big fan of.
It's so bloated, and you being in New York, Nick, you can appreciate when you're in the pinstripes and you're winning championships. That bloated payroll is a badge of honor, right? We're gonna go get your best player, and we're gonna get Tex, and we're gonna get Giambi and A-Rod and so on and so forth. But bringing it back to basketball, man, when you're losing hurt, injury or not, and guys, it's just looking bad, and you just got the highest paid player, and he was hurt, but no one cares about that, right? The highest paid player in the league history on your team, and you got Chandler Parsons, who everybody thought was overpaid, but good for him for securing the bag. I mean, I'd have done the same exact thing. And then you got Gasol, who's, had a down year, but I think is still very, very good player. But when he wants to be. When he wants to be. Right. Yeah, I have thoughts on that Fizdale thing too. But, when it's going bad, the only thing that fans and even the people that consider themselves professionals, air quotes, the only thing that we have to hang on to is look how much money these guys are making, and they're playing like ass, right? That's the only thing. That's the point we'll hit every single time. That train is never late, right? So the cap situation and all the money they have tied up in a bunch of dudes, my gosh, the team might move back to Vancouver. I don't know what the option is, right? It's just, God, it's ugly. It is ugly.
Yeah, they had hopes for Chandler Parsons, obviously, to be the glimpse of what he was in Houston, right? I mean, he showed some promise in Houston, obviously, but it never really got to where we expected, because in Dallas he got hurt so much.
He never felt like this, like, I mean, no disrespect to Chandler Parsons. I always thought he was a good player, but he's never, ever felt like a $24 million a year type player.
No.
Like, he's never felt like he's going to be one of your best players. Even at his best, he was more of a complimentary piece in Houston. And I just feel like it was part of the cap, but I just feel like teams are overhyping him, especially with the injury history. Why would you lock up somebody like that long term with big money?
Right.
I don't know. It was always like mind boggling. And Portland's lucky. And I think Kory and I might have touched on this at another point, is they're lucky they didn't, because Chandler Parsons, I think, was down to Memphis and Portland in terms of who he was going to sign with that offseason. He chose Memphis and kind of blessed them with this terrible contract.
This is what we talk, and this is not this pod. It's another day. And Nick, I know what you're going to say. That's another pod for another day, but I'll make this point quick. This is the point when people are like, salary cap, players, anytime it's free agents, you watch this tweet like clockwork. There's going to be a tweet from Dick Vitale this summer when guys are getting their money, because this jackass always does this. He says, well, these guys are making all this money. I wish I had some of that for cancer research. Screw yourself, Dick Vitale, because you could ask all your rich buddies taking money, all this free labor from these college kids, to give some money to your cancer research. Don't get in these guys' pockets and do that bullshit. That bothers me. That's point one. Point two is that cap spike showed that owners don't know what the hell they're doing. People are always like, players got this money, that money. The cap spiked, and guys lost their freaking mind. Like, you didn't have to pay Chandler Parsons $25 million a year. Or you fucking stupid. Why would you do that? Like, people, salary cap and small market, bullshit. No, you don't have to pay these guys this money. If you want to exercise some kind of cap discipline and not spend all this money, I mean, people shit on Sam Hinkie, but it turns out he was right all along, it seems like, and not give a guy a $100 million contract just because you have the money. Like, these rules are not about the players. These rules are about owners and GMs saving themselves from themselves. I mean, holy crap. We spent, 30 minutes talking about Ryan Anderson having $20 million a year, which is only topped right now by Chandler Parsons. Now that I think about it, it's just so funny that people get all crazy about money and players having this cash. And it's like, well, quit telling the stupid owners to give $100 million to Chandler Parsons or to give $20 million a year to Ryan Anderson. Like, it is so stupid. It drives me crazy. But
anyway, to touch on that too, is Adam Silver recommended that they kind of spread out the cap jump over a 5-year span instead of doing it so much in, like a 2-year jump, and they voted against it. So Adam Silver was trying to look out for everybody, and they're like, "Oh no, we don't want to listen to you, man."
Right. It was good. And that was the player union. That was LeBron James being head of the player union saying, shit, no, I need all my money. So we want the spike right now, which is fine for LeBron, because even everything he does, LeBron James is still underpaid. He should be paid more like Ronaldo or Messi, and he's not. So they're actually getting a bargain on him. But yeah, what happens is the effect of that is the Chandler Parsons of the world get $200 million contracts, right?
Joakim Noah, Mozgov, the list, Lil Dang, the list goes on and on.
So sorry, I digress this big time, but that just really.
I like the rant. I like Jay hot and heavy. That was nice.
The owners they do catch so much of a break.
He sends that tweet too. He always, oh my God, look at all the money these guys make. I was just like, get the fuck out of here. Tell Patino to do that, right? Get some of your rich friends who have free labor that are making all this money off the backs of these college players. Let them give some money. Don't get in these players' pockets like that. God, that pisses me off. Sorry.
It's the same thing too. No, I agree with Jay though, in the sense that people are like, "Oh, the players get so much." So you rather see some billionaire owner take more money for his pocket, which he has plenty of money to do anything. He probably has 6 yachts and he's doing whatever. But it's a big deal because some NBA player wants $30 million, and they're probably only going to work 10 years because their body's going to be cooked by the time they retire. But hey, whatever. But that's for another pod, like Jay said.
There's another pod, yes. But
team needs. I think this is a lot of needs on this team. It's like rebuild or not. Like, do we want to go full rebuild? Do we want to trade off some of the pieces, or what are we going to do?
I say you get your money's worth, man. You got them under contract. I say you keep, you retool on the fly. I don't think you can probably pay Evans what he's going to command in this offseason, but I think you got to bargain shop a little because you got so much money tied up in your stars with Conley and Gasol and Parsons. So, but I think you keep it together, and I mean, you got the money tied up in these guys anyway. Maybe they're not. I don't think they're a 50-win team, but maybe they're better than 25 wins, obviously. So, I think you keep this core together. at least for another season. And I mean, they're there. And if it's looking bad trade deadline, then maybe try to move Gasol or something like that. I don't know if anybody's taking Parsons' money, but maybe you move Gasol at the trade deadline if nothing's there. But I think you sort of retool on the fly. I think you could use some shooting help. I think they could use some depth in the backcourt. Yeah, I don't think you fire sell it just yet. You already pay these guys. You might as well see if you can ride it out for a season or two.
I mean, I think if you can move Gasol or Parsons, you do it without hesitation.
Well, Parsons, they'd have to attach the number 4 pick, which they've been talking about. But like, do you really want to do that?
Yeah. No. I think aside from that, you maybe try to, I think without doubt you try to move Parsons, whether that's attaching the pick. I don't think you should do. I think Marc Gasol, I think they should have tried to trade him at the deadline last year. I think that's when he still had some value, because now again, he's another year older. He's a big man in the wrong generation. If he has a slow start, his value is gone, and no one's going to want him for $24 million. Let alone the player option that he's going to probably accept for $25.5 million. So that's the issue there. You're locked into these two guys. I think even though I wouldn't do it, I think you're right, Jay, to the fact where I think they have to do it. Basically, they're going to have to run this back. Hopefully, these 3 guys stay healthy, and maybe at best, like you said, you're a 34 to 40 win team possibly, and you're a 10 or 9 seed in the West, and you're at least somewhat competitive.
Yeah, it's very tough because they don't have their pick next year. I believe it is protected in some extent. I think it goes to Boston. So it's like if we do tank next year, we don't have our pick unless it's a really high one. I want to say it's protected 1 through 7. So if they really, really tank, they could get it back. But moving Gasol, you're not going to get a great value. Parsons is going to be the number 4 pick attached. I don't see any other scenario in moving him. And Conley is like your only good player, and his contract's big. So it's even hard to work the books and work a deal from him when you're making 30 plus a year. But team free agents, Tyreke Evans, Mario Chalmers, what are your thoughts on those two?
I mean, for me personally, I would bring back Tyreke Evans if I can, but I think he might get a lot of money because of how he played last season. And then Mario Chalmers, I mean, I don't know what to expect from him anymore. He had a decently nice stint with Memphis due through all the injuries, so maybe you bring him back just because he's a vet. He can be a backup point guard.
Yeah, I'm the same. I don't know. Again, I don't know what kind of number Evans sort of played himself into this year. So, I mean, if you get him on something that you're comfortable with, then sure. If not, then I personally wouldn't lose too much sleep over it, just given their cap situation and maybe what the direction of the team might be come the the All-Star break or the midway point of the season. So, I think they should go away as an organization, away from locking guys up for a really long time, not towards it necessarily. And then Chalmers, I agree. I mean, he had a solid season. His number, I don't think he'll command this great off-season number. So I think if he can get back at a price that you can live with, I don't see any issue re-signing him.
Talking trades, Kory's already mentioned possibly dumping Parsons. Would you attach the number 4 pick and Parsons in a deal where obviously you're getting something solid back and probably some young talent? Would you consider moving that, or you think you need to hold on to that number 4 pick?
I say that Memphis is one of those places, again, going to the gospel of Sam Hinkie, who ironically is in Philly, who I don't think necessarily has this problem. But the point I was going to make was, and the point we made with New Orleans, and Nick, I thought was a great point, why you don't move DeMarcus. You don't trade that pick because free agents don't go to Memphis. Your star is going to be a homegrown star. The biggest star in Grizzly history is arguably Marc Gasol, who was acquired via trade for his brother and had his rights, right? So no one's going to sign, no matter how high the cap spikes. The kind of star that you want, I don't think is going to sign with Memphis in free agency. I think it's a place where your star is going to be homegrown talent. So in that respect, I say you don't attach it if you can help it, because that number 4 pick in a relatively deep draft, I think there's some people out there. I think that's a pick you hold on to unless you can flip it for an established star. But I don't think your star walks in and takes your money in Memphis, Tennessee. I think that star is homegrown. So for that reason, I say you hang on to it if you can.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. you're a small market team or a medium market team, whatever Memphis is. I'm not positive. It feels small. I used to always compare them to the Pacers of the West when the Pacers were that defensive stud. They were in the 2012, 2015 season run. But I agree. I would be really hard pressed to trade that draft pick, even if I'm getting rid of Parsons, only because you can swing big in this draft. This draft class to me is really stacked, and I think at four you can still get a Marvin Bagley or somebody like that who can make a decently big impact early. And then if you trade that pick away and Parsons, I mean the cap flexibility becomes there. But then is the young guy you're getting in return worth it? And what team really is going to trade for Parsons? And what young, you know what I'm saying? I just don't know the trade partners for them in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to most likely be a team that's in the lottery and willing to take on a contract. It's weird because also you don't know what's good with Memphis. Are they trying to win now? Do they want to take a veteran back that can kind of help them win? Do they want young guys? Do they want in-between players? It's kind of like what the value is. And also at number 4, you could see, like a Doncic drop and possibly get a really good player. There's a couple really good players at the top of the draft. Some of the guys that are going to go at 4, 5, or 6 could end up being the best players in the draft, considering what some draft experts have said. So I think it's really hard to just do it for a mistake you made. It's like cleaning up a mess that you already made. Just let it happen. It's already done.
I mean, I'd say this: if I was if I'm the Pacers, I wouldn't be totally against trading for Parsons in the 4th round pick, personally. But then I don't know the assets the Pacers have. I mean, we can give them our late 1st round pick, and then a couple like Bogdanovich and Darren Collison. But I don't know if that's something that
I think they'd probably want like Miles Turner and maybe more.
Right, and then we would say, "Go screw yourself. You have Jalen Parsons." Ha ha ha, and then we'd hang up.
I mean, it depends on also what, if there's somebody at 4, it comes down the draft night. Somebody dropped the 4 that your squad really likes. There's only a handful of teams that can really make this move with the Parsons contract being so big. But talking free agent targets, what are we thinking? Just young diamonds in the rough here because the cap situation isn't pretty. They're not going to attract really many big names.
Yeah, you're looking at the same usual suspects. Like the Doug McDermotts, the cheaper end shooters that might be able to throw in some help. But aside from that, your free agent target's going to be slim to none.
Agreed. I think your bargain bin, at least for this summer, and then you make some moves, imaginations through the season, and then you come back in 2019 and see if you can put yourself in a better position. But I can't picture anyone that they could land that would be of note other than in the local papers that they signed some guy. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't know that there's anybody that they could get or that they have the money to entice someone to come live in Memphis this offseason. So
yeah, it's going to be the younger guys, some maybe diamonds in the rough. They have the mid-level exception, which they'll probably use, and they could probably get, depending on what happens with Tyreke Evans, if they want to bring him back, they could have like a little bit of money to overpay, some role players or something like that. But nothing crazy on the free agent market. But that wraps it up for the Southwest Division. As always, Kory and Jay, thank you for hopping on. Thank you, everybody, for listening. You can check out all the previews on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, HOU+NOP+SAS+DAL+MEM, Google Play, and Dash Radio. Thank you.